Hello and welcome to a very crowded marketplace here in the city of Bruges. The traditional start now of the Belgian classic race, the Tour of Flanders, the 92nd edition. I'm Phil Liggett. Alongside me is Paul Sherwin. And Paul, the traditional signing in here of the riders.
Everybody getting a chance. This is Stefan Weserman, a former winner of this race, and Thomas Voeckler, a former French national champion and, of course, a former wearer of the yellow jersey in the Tour de France.
Well, the French don't usually do too well in this event, but this is Gianni Meersman, who's a Belgian rider on a French team, Française des Jeux, followed by a Frenchman who could do, or rather a Belgian French-speaking rider here, in Philippe Gilbert, who will look to win today, I think.
I think he'll be looking for a fine performance. He's had a great start to the season with a good win in Het Vault. This is Alan Davis. He's finally got himself a contract on a European team. Former finisher in the top three here, Fabio Baldata, but he will be looking after the interests probably of his teammate, Alessandro Ballan.
And there he is, Ballan, last year's winner, and he's also had 2 top 6 finishes as well. And he says he loves this event and he's going to try and repeat again today. The weather conditions, as we watch Manuel Quinziato come up to the front, are chilly, but there's threats, of hail and sleet out on the course.
Big Magnus Backstedt, former winner of Paris-Roubaix, looking for great form, recently finishing second in the time trial stage of the 3 days of La Panna, so he'll be looking to ride well today.
Well, Magnus, this is one of the big days. This is what being a professional bike rider is all about, the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can just look at the crowds out here today. You know it's a special day in Belgium, and you can definitely feel the race days coming on. So I'm looking forward to it.
A lot of pressure on your shoulders, but surely you're thinking a little bit forward to Paris-Roubaix. Although this is a great bike race to win too.
Oh, definitely. I mean, if I can get up there today, I'll take the chances and the risks necessary to be there. But the big focus is on next weekend. So we'll see what happens today.
Bit of a learning process as well for Team Slipstream Chipotle. For a lot of these young guys, they really are not going to know what's hitting them.
No, I think we only have actually 2, maybe 3 guys that have ridden the race before. So, they're up for a big shock today, but I think they will learn from it and walk away stronger. Thank you. Thank you.
The year started well for you in the Tour Down Under, and it looks like you're ready for a good race here in the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Yeah, it's a great start in Australia, and now we are 3 months later, and the condition is also so good, and I hope to finish on the podium today.
It's a little bit different though here, though. The pressure is a lot more on you as a Belgian rider.
Yeah, in Belgium it's very different. The supporters just so much, and I hope 1 million person along the road today, and it's very big.
Good luck today.
Thank you.
Well, George, these are the days that you really love. Tour of Flanders, Paris-Roubaix, they're special races, aren't they?
Yeah, these are really epic races. It's hard to really describe how special they are and how hard they are. It's really going to be a war out there today, and we're going to do everything we can to be with the leaders.
A little bit different for you this year as well, because it's not the same team you've been with for a number of years, but you have got a solid team behind you.
Yeah, actually the team is really strong. I mean, it's, when you go to the really crucial sections, you kind of look around, there's always 3 or 4 high road guys there. So I'm really excited about doing the classics races with High Road. It's a strong team, really experienced guys like Clear. He knows every inch of the road. So just try to stick with him, and hopefully I'll have some good luck and finish up on the podium.
That's what I think is important about a race like the Tour of Flanders, to have the experience, and you have the experience of a very long career and a love to do well in these races.
Absolutely, these are my favorite races. I train hard for this week here, Flanders and Roubaix, and I just hope for luck and good feelings, and I should be there.
Good luck, mate.
Thanks, Paul.
Jerry, great to see you. Looking very happy, pretty relaxed at the start of the Tour of Flanders.
Yeah, it's certainly makes a nice little change having your family and little boy here. First time I've come up from Flanders, and the last race he come to see was Paris-Roubaix, so fingers crossed.
I was talking to a few of the riders before the start, and although we haven't seen a lot of Stuart O'Grady, a lot of the guys are saying you've got the legs for today.
Oh, I'm pretty happy actually, flying under the radar. My name hasn't been mentioned for a couple of months, so I'm more than happy with that. I'm in a very similar situation to last year. Fabian's obviously got the form of his life. We're there to ride for him, but if an opportunity arises, then one of our CSC boys will be there to take it.
I remember talking to you and Henk Vogels a few years ago about these races. These are special races for you. You really like to do well here, don't you?
Yeah, it's the first time I've felt like racing all year, to be honest. the first time you kind of switch on. You know, these are the big ones. These are the ones you want to win, and these are the ones that you remember.
And having your little boy and your wife alongside here today, that's going to be inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, every little thing counts in this game.
Different jersey this year, and it's nice to see at the Tour of Flanders. Almost half Flemish yourself. You're very motivated today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's almost my home race now. I've lived here so long now. It's definitely got a special feeling to it. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Talking to George Hincapie, he said he's very motivated by today, and he feels that when it comes to the critical points of today's stage, he'll always have a number of teammates alongside him.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big change for George this year. You know, he's come away from a tour-based team to a team that's very highly motivated for the classics. So. I think there's a lot of experience in this team providing these races, so I think he's right. I think there'll be a lot of guys there to help him late on in the race, in the final, in the critical moments.
And although the weather's very nice at the moment, the roads out in Flanders and around the hills are pretty nasty.
Yeah, I heard there's some snow coming as well, so I think it's going to be a classic.
Good luck.
Cheers, thanks very much.
Tom, you've had a fairly quiet week this week, but everybody's saying that your legs are ready for the Tour of Flanders today.
Yeah, I'm ready. This is my first real big objective. For the first time in my career, I tried to do nothing in front of Flanders. I just tried to focus, be 100% fresh, not get anything else in my mind. Don't get worried about other races, and it's worked out. I'm feeling really good. We go to the start now.
Well, I got to say that was a great interview with Tom Bonan. We were just finishing off the interview. I was going for the next question, and he says, thanks very much. The race has just started, so he's gone. And so are we.
So it's a crowded square here. A little bit of a reminder there, Paul, of what's to come. The cobble roads in the marketplace here in Bruges. And it's famous for the small climbs. Let's have a look first, though, at the winners in recent years. Johan Museo now retired back in 98. So too retired Van Petegem. Looking down the other end, Balan is here to try and defend. Tom Bonan, if he wins today, makes it 3. He'll join the all-time greats. No rider has ever won it more than 3 times. 4 riders have succeeded.
Well, Tom Bonan's got the chance to win today and, of course, to go and win it for a 4th time and really write his name down into the history books. And that's what he'll be looking for, the top step of the podium there. The World Cup standings at the moment after the Tour Down Under, Andre Greipel with maximum points there. He's got a strange number because he also won most of the stages there too, to give him a grand total of 62 points. Stuart O'Grady backing him up at the bottom end of the table there in position number 10. But that actually was rather important, Phil, because you can see that it's actually the order of the riders here in the World Cup rankings that actually gave them the positions of the team cars. Very important on a day like the Tour of Flanders when the roads are very narrow and dangerous.
Right, well, let's go and have a little short look at what's happened in the story so far. But before we do that, here's the actual race route. We start in Bruges as we head down to Rosslare, Kortrijk. And once we're through Kortrijk, we're into deepest Flanders. Then the little hills, we call them bergs, start. The Kleisberg is the first of the 17 climbs.
Yes, and then the riders, climb number 3 hit the Molenberg, but I always believe that this race really kicks in at the climb number 5 there, the Oude Quaremont. And of course, once you get down to the end of all 17, the real difficult ones are the Muur de Grammont and the Bosberg to finish before the riders end up with a 264-kilometre route into Merbeke, Ninove.
Well, weather conditions is very, very good if you're watching Tour de Flanders. A bit tough for the riders today. They started in very cold conditions. They're coming to the start of the Kleisberg climb here. Altogether, there's been the usual little flurry, but surprisingly today, nobody succeeding in breaking clear of the pack. A sign that the big favourites are watching one another.
This is a little bit earlier on before we actually go to the live pictures. This is the town of Bellegem, and it was voted the town of the Ronde this year, and that's why they've got all the bunting out and the Lion of Flanders, because not only, as you've mentioned, Phil, is this a very important bicycle race, this is probably the biggest annual sporting event of the year in Belgium.
And once you leave there, you head on to the lower slopes of the Kleisberg. All of these climbs are not very big, but they hurt. This one is a maximum gradient of 13%. It's about 1.2 kilometres long, and this is where the move, which we're about to join the live action, got clear. Tom Velers of Skill Shimano, Sven Renders of Top Sport, Jérôme Vincent, the Frenchman on Bouygues Telecom, and the rider in our picture there is Yannick Tombak, who's setting the pace here.
Well, Tombak coming back to the top of his form. In fact, nice to see him in a breakaway move like this. Formerly a long-time resident on Team Cofidis, but he really was never very consistent. And it's quite funny, really, when a rider finds that he's losing his position on the team and has to battle his way back into the sport, how all of a sudden he finds his form and dedication again. This is the Klausberg on the one side that we've climbed up, but a lot of riders know this climb as the Mont de l'Enclus, and that's the French name for it. We're not too far away here, actually, from the French borders.
And good move pushing on there. Sven Renders, the top sport rider, pushing on now a little bit further down the road. The maximum these riders have gained, 2 minutes 10 seconds. Not without compensation for the crashes here. A number of riders falling on the road. Sergei Lagutin of Cycles Kolstrop having a bit of a tumble here. We might be able to get a look at that again. Yes, and watch the motorbike on the right, because it's in fact Lagutin who falls very just on the edge there of that motorbike. The motorbike did well to miss him. He certainly wasn't at fault.
I tell you what, who would like to be a cameraman in a race like the Ronde van Vlaanderen? It is very dangerous, not only for the riders, but for the men who bring us the images, the still images and the movie images of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Everybody has to be alert. I think we're now starting to feel the nervousness in the main field, because they realise that very shortly, Phil, they'll be getting into what I regard as the most important start of the strategic race here, and that will be the Old Quaremont. But I tell you what, the weather conditions are not great.
And yet more crashes here. The leaders catching a hailstorm. Funnily enough, none of this bad weather coming to the finishing line of the race, but out in Flanders they were catching some bad weather all of the time here. And the Cofidis rider here also having himself a little bit of a trouble, a little bit of a problem. It looked to me as though it was Rick Verbrugge himself there wrestling with his bike. Well, the lead went out, maximum of over 2 minutes, but very attentive the main field, chasing them down and quickly reducing it despite all the tumbles and the crashes at the back.
Well, this is that crash just once again, and you see why it's so important in a race like the Ronde van Vlaanderen to ride up near the front end of the main field, because most of these crashes and accidents actually happen in the back 50% of the field.
Very nervous big peloton here, and then this makes them even more nervous, because as they headed up towards the second climb of the day, they really did catch a deluge. Temperatures plunging just onto the verge of freezing. Stein de Volder right in the centre there as the hailstones bit into his skin. The Mitsubishi Jatazi team got Tombak in the breakaway, which will take a little bit of pressure off Alan Davis, the Australian rider, who is very anxious to prove himself now. He's had a rough ride all year finding a team. His name was linked with the Operation Puerto drug scandal, but even his own federation in Australia has cleared him of anything to do with that. And yet he's become sort of untouchable by the big teams, which is a great shame, because Alan Davis is a pretty nice guy and he deserves the chance to race. Well, he's found this team and he wants to prove he's worthy of much better than this.
Well, it's very difficult. His name was linked to a number of the top Pro Tour teams in the early part of the season, but I think probably, Phil, that link with Operation Puerto, a lot of teams now are very concerned about the battle against drug taking, and unfortunately in the day and age that we're living, it really has become a question of you're guilty until you can prove your own innocence.
No, there's no doubt about that now, and the fact is, if I was to tell you that Paul Sherwin's on drugs, that would be enough. So it's past the joke to stop him probably riding for the moment.
Well, I wouldn't be able to ride at the moment because I've been taking cough medicine since this morning, and I think that would probably show up quite high on a gas radiography machine.
Well, the peloton repairing itself after the latest fall. These are the hard men of the world of cycling, and Belgium, if anybody has ever had the opportunity to race in Belgium, then you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you should try it. But these are surviving races, and then you think about winning them when you survive the first few hours of high speed, lots of crashes, and usually a fair percentage of bad luck as well. And if you can sit near the front and miss out on all of that, then you have a real good shot at winning a race like the Tour de Flanders. It's still in the early stages, lots of time yet for the riders, because the main hills of the day still ahead of the riders. Yesterday there were thousands of cyclists took part in the what they call the Randonnée or the Cyclo Sportif Tour de Flanders. Even Sean Kelly, the great, who never actually won this race but finished second on 3 occasions, was taking part yesterday.
This is Mathieu Ladagnou. He went down a little earlier. You can see he's been ripped apart rather rapidly. Just talking to the team car is Timothy Goodsill, the Kiwi rider on Team Française des Jeux, having a quick chat with the race doctor. So he obviously was also involved in one of those accidents. It is a very nervous part of the race, Phil. Yes, we are an awful long way to go, but you have to be alert. You have to stay near the front. this is probably one of the most important races of the year alongside Paris-Roubaix, where you have to try and stick in the top 20 to 25 riders.
Well, the confusion's helping out as Thomas Voigtler passes through picture there. 2 minutes 10 is the latest time check coming out from the race now, so they're more preoccupied with themselves. There's Fabian Cancellara, very confident, I thought, this morning when he was being interviewed on the stage before the start, and he's really on top of his form. He's never ridden so well this last couple of months. Since he won Paris-Roubaix, he's been a different bike rider. 5 time trial victories last year, but boy, were they great wins. World Championship, Swiss Championship, prologue of the Tour de France, they were the biggies.
They were, but he continued this year with a great start in the Amgen Tour of California. But I think the way he dominated the main field, Phil, in Milan-San Remo was phenomenal, and an indication that tactically he's riding superbly, but he's got the power to back it up.
Absolutely right, because everybody knew the move was going to be made by him. They were there and they couldn't stop it when it came, and he rode to a very superb victory in Milan-San Remo for sure. Not surprising, Paul, to see the boys from Lampre down there on the front at the moment, because they've got great confidence in last year's winner, Alessandro Ballan, who won last year, and the 2 years previously to that he finished 5th and 6th, so he's a man for this race. And as so often in recent years, the Italians have become the men of Flanders.
Well, you have to be super motivated. We're looking here at the Kop van der Wegstraat at the front end of the race on the left-hand side, and the main field or the peloton on the right-hand side. But you're right, I think since riders like Franco Ballerini, the Italian riders have been very much motivated by races like the Tour of Flanders and, of course, Paris-Roubaix, and that was followed up by the great Andrea Taffi. And since then, a lot of the Italians have not been worried at all about expatriating themselves, as was the case in the 1970s and 80s when they didn't really enjoy racing outside of their own borders.
Well, a little bit of statistics for you as we watch the race try to decide what's going on up front. This being the 92nd Tour of Flanders, the Belgian riders have won 64 editions of this event, while the Italians come a distant second place with 10 victories, but a lot of those victories coming quite recently. The Belgians haven't won this race really since Tom Bonen, well, it's only 2 years ago, and before that it was Thomas Welp. And the Germans also haven't won it since Stefan Wessermann, who's riding again today. That was happening in 2004.
A little bit further back, this is Gianni Meersman. He's a rider who's only just 22 years of age, and in fact a lot of people are tipping him for stardom for Belgium. He was picked up in his first year as a professional by Johan Bruneel, as was this man as well, the Belgian national champion Stijn de Volder, riding at the back. I think today his race will be very much dominated by what the form of Tom Bonen is, because Bonen, to me, although he hasn't done a lot since the Tour of Qatar in the early part of the year, he looked pretty much like a fettled racehorse as he came in to sign on.
I think you're right. I would take that as a danger sign, the very fact he has not been winning races, because normally Tom comes out and he wins right, left and centre, and this year he's been very quiet since he started off so well, so I'd be quite worried about that. He looked extremely fit this morning. He had legs to die for, I have to say. His muscles looked perfect.
He looked absolutely phenomenal, and he was relaxed before the start as well. I know last year I tried to interview him before the start, and it was absolute mayhem. You could see the nervousness. He was nice and relaxed coming down to the start gate. He stopped and had a quick chat with one or two of the journalists, and then, in fact, he ended our conversation very rapidly and said, "Paul, I've got to go. The race has just started."
Well, at 27 years of age, Tom has won nearly 90 races already, so he only turned pro in 2002. There again are our top 4 riders who got away on the first climb of the day. A little bit later than normal, I have to say, but the tailwind was keeping the race at very high speeds, and altogether we're starting to swing in an easterly direction rather now as we move after the journey south from the start, as we head into the area here now of the real Flanders, where the hills abound, many of them cobbled. And a new little challenge there now, these speed humps they're putting down in the towns around Belgium.
Well, these riders are looking at around about 10 to 15 kilometres to the next section of rather tough cobblestones, and that is the Molenstraat. But after that, they will have the very long, difficult section of the Paddestraat. And although the rain is not coming down here, the rain has come down consistently over the last few days, and the Paddestraat is absolutely soaking and covered in mud. It won't affect these 4 riders, but it will be a battle, Phil, I think, on the Paddestraat when the main field comes there, and we may well see the first serious acceleration in the peloton.
Well, Looking at the breakaway here, well, we're back to the peloton now as they all start to mass. Nobody interested in that breakaway. In fairness, the riders up front haven't got the big pedigree. They're a perfect break to draw the attention away from themselves in the peloton, I think, because I suppose Yannick Tombak is the most experienced rider. He rides for that Mitsubishi Jartazi team now, but he's heading up 32 years of age. I think his best classic finish, Paul, ever is a 5th place in Paris-Brussels, which is really a semi-classic.
Well, he was a rider who was tipped for stardom when he was riding for Team Cofidis. They expected an awful lot of him. He was the Estonian national champion, but he seemed to lose his way a fraction. And once you get down to the smaller teams, if you've got the class, it gives you a chance to get back into the top end of the sport. But just looking down here, you can see how dangerous the Ronde van Vlaanderen is as well. You've got all these little directional islands. You have to be so alert. There's the white jersey at the front there. That is André Greipel, the leader of the World Cup. But I think today his race will not be to try and get himself points in this race. He'll be looking after the interests, I think, of one George Hincapie.
I think you're right. In fairness, though, he'll look for a chance. There's 50 points at stake for victory today in the World Cup competition. He comes to this race already with 6 wins this year, but the hatful coming in the Tour Down Under. In fact, all of his races coming down there. He won 4 stages of the Tour Down Under out of a possible 6. Now, if that isn't domination, I don't know what is. He also won the sort of hors d'oeuvre of the Tour Down Under, which was the Glenelg Classic. This is a lovely seaside town in South Australia, and that should have warned us how he was going to ride a couple of days later. He's a man very pleased with himself, and he's feeling as though he's breaking out of the shadow of the other team sprinters now, because he is beginning to show his talent. And you know, he's still only 25 years of age.
I think it's one of those things you need a click to get your career going, and I think for him that click was certainly the Tour Down Under, and it's given an awful lot of confidence. We're looking here at the Onderstraat. It's only a small section of cobblestones. It's around about 300 metres in length, but these 4 leaders now have stretched their advantage out, Phil, to 1 minute and 58 seconds.
Well, these early journeys to the hills take a little while to reach, but once we get to them, starting down by the Paterberg and the Koppenberg, then we are in them and they come thick and fast. These 4 riders, Tom Vuelers, Sven Renders, Vincent Jérôme and Yannick Tombak, setting the early pace.
Well, the Onderstraat, just on the outskirts of Gavere, puts those 4 riders just 12 kilometres away from the Paderstraat, which is 2.4 kilometres in length, and that is around about 127 kilometres to go to the finish. And in fact, just looking at the time, Phil, they're just outside of the fastest time of the day, so they really are going very quickly.
5 minutes inside the 13:11, so they're doing very well at the moment. Well, we're now arguing here about our watches, but never mind. They're on schedule, put it that way, for a best time finish.
I suppose it depends whether we're talking GMT or VMT, Vlaamse median time, and that's where we are at the moment. Well, this is definitely Gavere, so at least we know we're on the right section of cobblestones, just a short 300-metre hors d'oeuvre. And for these guys at the Paderstraat, seriously, is a very difficult section of cobblestones. The first real test, I think, of the day.
A real Tour of Flanders, the hotbed of world cycling. The Belgian people, I think, are the best spectators in the world. They know their sport, they know their riders. They'll cheer everybody. They appreciate the efforts that these riders make. And of course, they'll be ecstatic if Tom Boonen finally gets over that finishing line in Meijerbeek himself. It looks like a rider either fell there, or there were so many people going around the corner, he had to stop to make the bend, but he's certainly restarting.
It's a chaotic race, this, a very nervous race, and on days like this, when you've got a little bit of wet weather coming in, mix that with a little bit of grit coming up from the roads, you can actually use a full set of brake blocks on a day like this, and the riders will have to probably throw them away at the end of the day. This is the Onderstraat, 127 kilometres to go. They've already been in the saddle for 137 kilometres, so just about halfway through the race.
And no chase on here. The riders are content to just hold position as long as they can. There's the problem. It's a back wheel puncture, I think.
It's a rider from Barlow World who was looking for a back wheel there. I'm not sure exactly who it was. A little bit further up, this is the leader of Team Barlow World. This is Marco Corti, who just happens to be the son of the team manager there, Claudio Corti, himself a world champion. The guy having the problem there, in fact, was Baden Cook, so there'll be a little bit of panic there.
New colours for Cookie as he now tries to refine himself. He still gets about 5 or 6 wins every year, even so, but he'd like a big result. Anyway, that's unlucky there. Now look at this, Paul. Skill have moved all the men up here.
Well, you know, this is a great team, and they've been very much recognised by the organisation of the Tour de France, because they've been accepted to ride Paris-Roubaix, and they are a team, and although they're one of the second-rate teams, second-ranked teams, I should say, they are riding very well now. I think that was the wrong way to go there down the left-hand side.
It seemed all right at the time, but then a Sony Duval rider stopped, and it made it look as narrow as it really was. So instead of coming out at the front, they're now coming out at the tail of the bunch, and all the work to get back up has to start again.
Yes, looking back at that team skill there, it always reminds me when I look at that jersey of the great Sean Kelly, because that was the jersey that he used to race in when he was at the height of his career. And sorry about that, guys, but there is a traffic jam on the left-hand side. Maybe that wasn't the shortcut you were looking for.
Well, he got the bunny hop correct, and then it sort of came to a halt. Danny Pate was sat at the back there for the Slipstream Chipotle team, presented by H3O, and he's sitting in the dangerous place at the back of the race, because the strong men will hold their position at the front, because as these roads get narrower, and they do get narrower, if you're not at the front, you can be 800 metres behind the leaders once you turn onto these narrow roads.
And once you get onto a section of cobblestones like the Padestrades, you can find yourself a minute behind the front end of the bike race, especially when you get the big acceleration. And the unfortunate thing that may happen there is you could find your team car 2 or 3 minutes behind, and that's a little bit of a problem, I think, today for Team Astana. I was talking to Johan Bruneel yesterday. He said the unfortunate thing for us in a race like today is because we didn't participate too well in the early season races, we're in fact car number 17 in the rankings, and that's not too good.
That's right. It's the first 10 cars, I think it is the order of the Pro Tour overall. So after that, you draw for position. And, a draw can be very important today, that's for sure. Getting your riders a wheel or a bike at the crucial moment, which will come later on, I think.
And it's also important to try and ride well, of course, in today and get yourself a few more points for next week, because next week is, of course, Paris-Roubaix. Unfortunately, not now included in the World Cup. The World Cup seems to increase in size and decrease in size on an ongoing basis. It's very difficult, actually, to keep up with it.
Well, there's the wayward Sony Duval rider who's now rejoined, but I can't see his number, so I don't know who he is. But in fact, new colours for Sony Duval as well this year, slight variance on what they were. David Miller, who was on that team, the British rider, now swung across to the American squad, Slipstream Chipotle, and looking forward to riding a full season with them. Baden Cook is back, which is good, so he's got a good wheel change, and he's rejoined actually very quickly there.
Well, the South African rider Robbie Hunter, one of the riders here for Team Barlow World. I haven't seen Robbie Hunter just yet. I was surprised to see that they selected Daryl Impey as well for Team Barlow World for the Ronde van Vlaanderen. I think he would have been a little bit more comfortable on the hillier roads of Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
I would agree. He's a very good sprinter, but I'm not sure with his light body weight he will still be around to use his sprint. But we'll find out, and we wish him well. Every rider who starts at La Ronde wants to get to the finish and say that they've done at least that, as they indeed do with Paris-Roubaix. Astana, first chance to see them now penetrating the air. Banned from this year's Tour de France, which means that the defending champion won't ride. Neither will the third place finisher Levi Leipheimer. Something of a travesty of justice, which seems to be the opinion of most. But that team being led on this occasion by Vyacheslav Ekimov, who's in the car this year.
Here's Cookie getting himself back into the main field. Achteraan van de peloton, the back end of the main field, and that is André Greipel just on the far side in his leader's jersey of the World Cup. But I have to say, Phil, we're talking about Team Astana. They may well have been banned from the Tour de France so far this year, but they haven't actually been banned from winning races, because they were dominant in the Amdin Tour of California. And just recently, I have to say that Alberto Contador was phenomenal in the Castilla-Leon, ably assisted by his teammate Levi Leipheimer, who was only a fraction of seconds behind him.
Contador has made a great start to the year and is not really too worried about the Tour de France, whether he defends it or not, quite honestly. He was placed in the Tour of Valencia, he finished third in the Tour of Murcia, and then he won the Castilla-Leon. So he's off to a good start to the year, and watch out for him perhaps in one of the other Grand Tours.
Well, looking at Team Astana riding at the front end again, going on with that conversation I had with Johan Bruneel last night. He said, look, we're going into the race with no pressure at all on our shoulders. And I think your tip for today is at Vladimir Gusev. And I think that is an excellent tip, because he is certainly one of the hard men of the squad, and he loves these conditions. We've seen him ride well in races like Paris-Roubaix, and he too really is pretty much a development rider for the future, a man who I think has enjoyed races like the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix in recent years.
And the other rider on the team is Thomas Weitkus, who's now come across, like they all did, most of them, from Discovery Channel, who disbanded at the end of last season. He's had 2 wins this year, stayed the Tour de Algarve. He finished 3rd in that race as well overall. And the Tour of the Green Heart, or the Ronde van Vlaanderen, here in Holland. So he's a man who's looking as though he might produce a sprint, but it's not just about sprinting the Tour of Flanders. You've got to have the strength to hold your position and to fight off all those who try to steal it from you. And around the back corner, from the referee's eyes, of course, fisticuffs is quite well known in the Tour of Flanders.
Well, it's really a question of sprinting for the corners like these. These corners are so strategically important, because we've seen already so far during the day, once you get into this point, there's a serious slowing down, and as you can see happening right in front of your eyes here, through the back of the main field, you get almost stopped, and then you have to accelerate again to get yourself back up to the front. Number 21, Johan van Sommeren. What a great character this man is. He can ride for guys like Leif Hoster in the flat stages here. He can look after Robbie McEwen, but he can also climb to assist Cadel Evans in the big mountain passes. A great domestique.
Oh, absolutely. He's a wonderful character too, but he's very tall and thin and ungainly. He's only won 2 races in his life, and everybody was really pleased with him last year when he won the 7th stage of the Tour of Poland, and that was enough to give him outright victory. There he is, Johan van Sommeren. And that was a big result for Johan, because he spent his whole life, which began as a pro in 2003, helping people like McEwen win races.
Yes, he's not worried about sitting on the front end of the main field for 50 or 60 kilometres. Although you can see that the main field here are not chasing in earnest, you can almost sense the nervousness starting to creep into them, because they realise that they too are not very much more than 4 or 5 kilometres now away from the Paddestraat. They're going into the town of Berlingen, and that puts him in fact 7 kilometres from the start of the Paddestraat. As we look here at the 4 leaders, who are still holding on to around about a 2-minute advantage. But once we start, Phil, to get to the Paddestraat and the Molenberg and the Olde Quaremont, you're going to see that 2-minute advantage really get eaten away.
Well, the Molenberg will be the next climb we'll see, and then we go on to the Wolvenberg and then the Old Quaremont. The Old Quaremont is a cobble brute, reintroduced after it was taken out, but it's back again, and it's where the riders tend to come to a standstill at the back of the field and push for all the worst so they don't lose contact. These are the 3 leaders again. The Bouygues Telecom rider, that's Vincent Jerome. I'm not sure if it's Vincent Jerome or Jerome Vincent.
Jerome Vincent. Anyway, he's the rider in the blue on the left-hand side there for Bouygues Telecom. And they're all working exceptionally well together, these riders. Talking yesterday, I had a chance to go around to a couple of the hotels and have a chat with 1 or 2 riders, and I was talking to the mechanics of Team Slipstream Chipotle, and looking at all the different bikes. Most of them are riding their Paris-Roubaix bikes today to test out the cobblestones and how they handle on the cobblestones for next week. What they've done mainly is increase the clearance at the back end so that they can put a larger rear tyre in. Although one man who doesn't want to ride his Paris-Roubaix bike today is Magnus Backstedt. He wants to save it for next week.
Ah, that's the sign of a winner. He's ridden some good Paris-Roubaix. Even in the year after he won Paris-Roubaix, he rode extremely well to finish in 4th place. So that was in 2005. So he's ridden very, very well indeed in this event. But then he has all this bad luck. When he crashes, he always crashes rather spectacularly and breaks bones. And he's coming back again from injury, but it looks though his form is good after a great ride in the 3 days of the Panna.
Well, I tell you what, I spoke with him last night at the team hotel, Phil, and he was telling me that although he had that very nasty accident in the Tour of Qatar, went down and broke his collarbone, the team was so organised. They had him back on a plane the next day. 12 hours after the accident, he flew back to the UK. He had an operation to put a plate into his broken collarbone, and he was on his bike 3 days later. He said, I couldn't pull too hard on the handlebars, but at least I was riding.
Yeah, good for him too. I remember I broke my collarbone once in a bike race, and I travelled to work by bus because I couldn't use my bike when I was working in Fleet Street, and the bus put on an emergency brake just as I stood up to go down the stairs to get off the bus, and of course with my broken arm I reached for the handle to stop falling. Can you imagine the scream that went through the bus?
Well, was that from you or was that from the ticket collector?
From everybody concerned, and especially for the bus driver.
Just look at this. This is
quite,
Tour of
quite
Flanders.
dangerous, isn't it?
It is very dangerous. You have to be alert. And that's why at the end of the day, these riders are not only tired physically, but they're tired mentally as well, because you're on the edge of the saddle all the time. If you look at them, they're all craning their necks over to the left-hand side, over on the left-hand side of the main field, trying to see what the gap is like.
and any of the brave souls who go around the back of the crowd. And I think the crowd here is a fairly well-trained crowd, because they know not to move, especially if they're watching the bike race, because there could be a bike rider almost anywhere.
It's the only place in the world where you see this, here in Belgium. And while all this is going on, and you can see the speed of the peloton, the gap has come down to 1 minute and 40 seconds. So they are in fact pulling back those 4 riders, despite the attractions of the road furniture here just now.
Just up at the front end there, you can see, just to have a look at how dangerous that is over on the right-hand side there. And in fact, that spectator, everybody's moving back. It really is. I'll tell you what, that spectator's going to have something to talk about when he goes home tonight, because he's probably got a little bit of sweat from a rider from the Ronde van Vlaanderen on the back of his shirt.
Well, really, you have to blame the riders for this too. They shouldn't be doing that, taking the big risks of the day. Just back at the team car is Alan Davis. Chance to see him taking on the bottles, asking how his mate's going up front at the moment.
Well, it's nice to see that Alain, as you said, Phil, has got himself a contract for this year, because he rode very well in the Tour Down Under. He almost got himself the victory here, but he was battling a really on-form Andre Greipel.
Yeah.
And of course, Alan Davis's name not appearing in the World Cup standings because his team doesn't qualify.
That's absolutely right. But he's fighting his way back in. He's a very fast finisher. Got that second place in Milan-San Remo last year.
Oh, I tell you, that's a squeeze.
It is amazing how they've got to keep so alert here. And you see, it's happening to riders at the back. The men at the front are seeing where they're going. The strong men sit up there.
Well, the reason for this is everyone's starting to get just that little bit nervous, Phil. You can see Team Quickstep moving to the front. The reason for that is not that we're getting to an important climb of the day. We're getting right up now to the Paddestraat, which is around about 4 kilometers. Team Liquigas also at the front there. They're thinking about their man, Pipo Pozzato. But the Paddestraat is a section of cobblestones, very much a Paris-Roubaix type section of cobblestones, where you've got to be in the first 10 places getting onto it. It's going to be wet, it's going to be dangerous, slippy. There will be crashes and flat tyres, so you don't want to be involved or behind any of that.
The weather forecast today was absolutely dire. It's fan out for these parked cars here. They're actually off the road, believe it or not, but you wouldn't think so right now. The weather forecast isn't as bad as it seems, because the weather is quite good. We've got blue skies, fluffy white cloud just now at the finishing line, and pretty much the same out on the course, as the riders will be pretty thankful about this. Although this morning Thor Hushoff did say he'd be very pleased if it was snowing today, because of course he comes from Norway, where there's snow aplenty at this time of the year.
Yeah, well, he's a tough character, is Thor Hushoff. He's a kind of rider who enjoys this kind of terrain. It's a race for courageous riders, men who are prepared to battle and ride at the front and battle for all these section of cobblestones to get onto them in the first 10 places. Looking a little bit further back, this is Joost Postuma, the recent winner. It looks as if he's gone down and had a little bit of an accident.
Yeah.
Got a blown nosebleed.
A little bit of a problem. Yes, it's running quite profusely right now. Maybe just pressure of the day. Here we are on the Paddestraat, the Kop van de Wedstrijd, the leaders of the race, the yellow flag that flies with the black line on it. They are the flag of Flanders, and this is what Paul was talking about now. 2.4 kilometers, and very narrow and a huge crowd, as always.
Very long at 2.4 kilometers. In fact, the gap of these 4 riders, because I think of the approach of the Paddestraat and the main field, has dropped down to 1 minute and 5 seconds, with the acceleration of riders like Tom Bonen's Quick-Step team on the front and Team Liquigas for Pipo Pozzato. This is actually the nicest part of the Paddestraat here, but it starts to get a little bit rougher once you get out into the countryside. Here it's nicely laid, but a little bit in about a kilometre or so you'll start to see just how rough it is. There's the main field getting themselves organised, and they are now also on the Paddestraat here, led by Team Silence Lotto.
Yes, it wasn't a good time there for Postuma to go to the back of the race, because now he's going to have to fight his way back up here. Now, there's no doubt who Silence Lotto riding for. There's no Robin McEwen in the race, even though he lives on the course at Brakel. Doesn't like the race and isn't taking part. He said he's going training today for 5 hours, and he'll watch the finish on television.
Third place here in the line is George Hincapie. Hincapie getting, as you said, a little bit older in his career, but certainly a man of great experience. You can just see him popping out there with the white helmet and the white shirt there of Team High Road. Brand new team for George, and that's quite amazing, because throughout his whole career he's basically been pretty much in the same team structure. Team Motorola for a long time, and then Team US Postal Service.
Ever faithful to Lance Armstrong, even though he had offers to go elsewhere, and had he gone elsewhere he may well have won Paris-Roubaix with a stronger team dedicated to that classic in the earlier days, like Mappe, Quick Step, etc. But now George very happy with Team High Road, very content. It made the decision last year to move when he thought he was moving to T-Mobile. They withdrew, so he finished up on Team High Road.
He was very happy before the start. He too was talking about the strength of his team with riders like Bernard Eisel and André Greipel, Roger Hammond alongside him. But he also, Phil, had a lot of good to say about Andreas Clear. He said the great thing about Andreas is he knows his way around this country quite remarkably. Even though he's a German, he spent a lot of time riding in this part of the world.
Placed in, well, in fact he won Gent-Wevelgem, didn't he? He beat Henk Vogel at the time, the Aussie. But this is life at the back. It's not so pleasant, is it, when you're just hanging onto the wheels in front? Behind the bunch.
Achteraan van de peloton, the back end of the main field, and it's certainly not the place that you want to be. It's much safer and much easier to ride at the front end of the main field. Look how the riders have their hands on the top of the handlebars. They're not really holding onto those handlebars really stiffly. They're just keeping them nice and soft. Bonen, you might have noticed there, in about 4th or 5th position, looking very relaxed. He's got the ideal body weight and position to float over the cobblestones, just like Johan Museo did.
And the very wet field we've just passed is indicative of the whole region just now. It's been under rain for weeks in and weeks out, and so we're going to see a little bit of mud on the roads. I'm pretty sure of that. And if the riders divert into the fields, well, we'll lose them because they're very, very muddy. But the Belgian people, this is their race and this is their country, and they just love watching this event. Packing all the way around the course. Huge crowd at the start again this morning. And this is a strange place to put a feeding station for, but I think we've got one.
That would actually be one of the illicit feeding stations.
Right.
A lot of the teams organise some of their supporters, they call them, although they've all got team jerseys on, to get to the end of the cobblestone sections with bottles and with spare wheels as well. It's actually somewhat contrary to the rules, but I think in a race like this, because of the special character, the referees and the organisers tend to just look the other way.
Looks like Leif Hoster here in second place, and he's had 3 second places. Now he's riding in second place. His number's 27, by the way, and the commentator this morning who interviewed him was referring to 2 plus 7, and he said yes, it makes 9, but I have no wish to finish 9th in the event. He's put 3 seconds so far to his name. A tremendous achievement, but of course to a professional cyclist it's the win that counts.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was inadvertently second in Paris-Roubaix, although that position was taken away from him because, if you remember, they stopped at the railway crossing and they disqualified the 3 riders who finished 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and he wasn't very happy about that.
All behind the winner who got through the level crossing, Cancellara. There was Hoster, there was Gusev, and one of the riders slips me at the moment.
It was an Italian.
Oh, it was Van Petegem. It was either Van Petegem or Vesseman. It was one of those 2. Anyway, back to the head of the race as the cars squeeze quickly by. That might be an indication, Paul, that they're coming up fast. I think they've got this down to about 30 seconds, you know. Oh, as I say, they're saying 35 seconds on the race radio. So they're just behind now the main field. This is a different Tour of Flanders to what we normally see. We normally see the escapers go early, gain big minutes, and then slowly get drawn back. They're going to be all together for the next climb.
They've certainly paid a serious amount of attention to this 4-man breakaway, and they've never really allowed them to go more than the 2-minute mark. That section of cobblestones there was just a small section of cobblestones at 300 metres, and that was the Kerkeplein. And I'm sure it's called Kerkeplein because it goes right next to the church there, just on the top right-hand side.
Slowed down just a little bit now, the nervous tension easing as they come away from the Paddestraat. And they're right, Paul, Kerkeplein it is, a 300-metre stretch, this one.
That's going to put them, once they come off the Kerkeplein, that puts them around about 5 kilometres away from the Molenberg. And in fact, I can hear race radio crackling in my ear now and accelerating all the cars away from the front end of the main field to give some gap between the front racers and, of course, the race when it comes into the Molenberg. A very steep and nasty climb, the Molenberg. You approach it along the valley road, and then there's a very nasty right-hand bend, and you go from a big, wide road big enough for about 4 cars in width, then all of a sudden it's as wide as a tractor.
Yes, and it only climbs up to 32 metres. That's about 100 feet above sea level. That's all it is. But it has a very steep gradient with a maximum increase of 14%, so it's quite a solid wall, this one.
Marco Corti there going off the back end of the main field, and that's an indication the pressure is actually starting to come on for a lot of these riders. Marco Corti, the son of the owner of the team, of Claudio Corti, I think, Phil, he's just learning the hard way how tough it is to ride races like the Ronde, as they affectionately call this race here in Flanders.
Slowly but surely the boys are under pressure here. This is David Boucher of Lambau Credit. He's also slipping away here. But a couple of Spanish riders gone off the back as well. We are very close now to starting the ascent of the Molenberg, and then we start what we call the real part of the Tour of Flanders.
Well, in the next 25 kilometres we've got 3 climbs which are fairly important. The Molenberg is the next one on the horizon, as you just said. That's followed 5 kilometres later by the Wolvenberg, and then of course for me the important climb where the Tour of Flanders really starts to split up the main field. At 79 kilometres to go, you've got the Haut de Quaremont, which is a climb of 2.2 kilometres. Although it's fairly steep at the bottom part, it's the false flat over the top that makes it a difficult climb.
First selection perhaps, and that's why Leif Hoster is riding right on the sharp end of the peloton here. And not surprisingly, keeping an eye on proceedings, George Hincapie's made a great move. By there he is, just off to the left of our picture. He's sitting up there, so too are the CSC riders. Is that Cancellara having his dinner? It is as well. So he's in a very good place. I've never seen such a confident man as he is right now. I guess that comes with winning.
Well, it certainly takes the weight off your shoulders when you start off well, as he did in the Amgen Tour of California, winning that opening prologue, getting himself the yellow jersey. But what impressed me more, I think, in the Tour of California, Phil, was the way he was actually climbing, because normally he's a man who struggles on the climbs, and they said the same thing about Tirreno Adriatico, which he also won. He was riding well on the climbs, but not climbing with power. He was climbing with great suppleness.
Gap opened slightly to 1:08, so the pressure's gone off because of the trip over the cobblestones behind them now. But that will be all put to rights once they get to the next journey along the road here. Somebody's trying to move up now as they try to regain front position.
Well, you see how they've spread out across the road. This is a slight lull. This is a time that you have to take advantage and scuttle up the outside, either left or the right, to get yourself to the front end of the main field, until all of a sudden somebody takes control of the pacemaking to stretch the race out into a long line before that right-hand turn into the Molenberg.
Stijn de Volder, the champion of Belgium, easy to spot in his tricolour jersey there of black, yellow and red. He's gone up to the front. He's just in the centre of our picture there. Back to the 4 leaders now. Here they are. They got away on the Kleisberg, and they're still away, but the gap 68 seconds. So on these long straight roads, they're not going to get too much an advantage now.
Well, they've never really been given very much freedom, and I think it's because of the weather conditions in the main field and the nervousness of the peloton. They didn't want to chase a long breakaway. They wanted to just keep it nice and sensible once we got in to the very difficult hilly. There's another crash at the back end of the main field. The rider just pushed off the edge there.
It sounds as though it's one of the top sport riders there.
Yes, it is. I didn't see who it was, but he certainly... it's very dangerous going around the corners here. You've got to pay attention all of the time.
Well, he's got back in, but of course he ran out of road. No injury. He's just got to make a lot of work now to dodge through the cars and get back up to the leaders. Not the sort of effort you ever want to make, because you've got to make every effort count on the Ronde.
Everybody looking over the shoulders here, looking to see where the teammates are, because they know now it's important to move up to the top end of the main field. Everyone looking to have a teammate with them. You can see just over to the right-hand side of the white jerseys of F de Jeu, Française de Jeu. They're looking after Philippe Gilbert, who I have to say put in a fine, dominating performance earlier this year in the Het Vault race, where he rode away from everybody in fine style. And he too sounded very confident at the start. He's a French-speaking Belgium on a French team. Now, this is how the accident happened. Just have a look there. Everybody's squeezing around that traffic circle to get themselves off the road. A little bit of a touch in the middle, and all of a sudden, I think really that rider who went into the ditch there, he was just looking for a soft landing.
I think it was Frederik Verkeulen who went down the ditch there, and it looks like it might even been a teammate who also got involved. But anyway, one thing's for sure, he'd be very smelly when he rejoins in the peloton.
Well, I've seen a number of riders go into those big ditches at the side of the road. We're looking at 57 seconds. I'm getting my Flemish wrong there. 57 seconds is the advantage. As you can see now, the acceleration, the main field taking this very seriously. They're getting themselves stretched out now because they're all waiting. They've got it fixed in their mind, and most of the teams will have ridden this course, Phil, in the preparation for the Molenberg, which is next on the menu for today.
Yeah, this is the thing, you see the pressure on the front now to stop anybody catching up. This is the race now for the, not to get over the top of the Molenberg, but to get to the start of it and hold position. It's all about holding position. Here come the charge of Rabobank, guiding 2 riders possibly here. I think all of the faith is in Juan Antonio Fletcher, who told us this morning, and I have to say I bow to his knowledge, that no Spanish rider has ever made the top 10 in the Tour of Flanders. And if that's true, he's out to put it to rights.
Well, he's the man who could. He's been great in the Paris-Roubaix Classics. He's a good, strong rider, and he has been for a number of years here. There's a little bit of struggling at the back here. This looks to me like this is Eric Zabel, and I think they're saying over race radio that he's coming back after having a flat wheel, a back flat wheel. No, in fact, he's still got it.
Still got it. He's waiting for a Lekkerbond, as they say. He's now waiting for a new back wheel, so it must have just happened. Bad luck for Eric.
Bad place to have it, especially just before the Molenberg, because that little sign over the road there as a Kop van de Wegstrijd sees indicating number 3, and that's the third Hellinger, the third climb of the day, the Molenberg. As you said, Phil, it doesn't climb very high, and it's only 500 meters, but I tell you what, it really is a nasty little acceleration.
Yes, looking at the gear systems on the bikes this morning at the start, surprisingly they were riding quite low gears, 24 sprockets on a compact chain set, because they know they're short and steep, but they have to allow for the fact that they may be brought to a complete standstill, and that then requires huge effort on the climb.
Well, in fact, Fabian Cancellara, for the aficionados, has got himself a 38-tooth chainring on the inside and a 25-tooth sprocket at the back.
Yeah.
And that, again, is just in case you've got to start from dead stop, and that's a very useful gear, of course, for the steep Koppenberg.
Absolutely. Well, stuck at the back here at the moment, Tom Wieler's from the skilled Shimano team.
And that's not 57 seconds.
No way. And you see the rider getting through on the inside there, and now halfway down the field they start to slow for that bend, but these boys have got control of the head.
Hincapie in third place again. There he is. Experience showing here for Big George here. The Molenberg.
And there's the back.
This is why you have to ride at the front, because these guys now are going to have to accelerate quite viciously to stay in contact, while the guys at the front have gone round at their own speed. They've started to ride. These men here now have lost themselves 30 to 40 seconds on the front runners because they didn't start the climb at the front.
Could even be a separate peloton once over the top, and a long chase to even get back on. They just hope now that they will rejoin. But some tough riding. George there's the traffic jam at the back again. Riders now having great difficulty, and it's no good complaining, but David Boucher is waving his arms, asking them all to move along as if they weren't trying to do so.
And there's Eric Zabel.
And that's what happens when you get a puncture at the wrong time. Poor old Eric back there.
He was wearing the black raincoat there, Zabel at the back end. Fabian Cancellara is just over there on the left-hand side. He doesn't want to show his cards too early, but he just wants to ride at the front, and I noticed a little bit of cyclocross. Zabel, professional here, just waiting for the traffic to unfold in front of him, but that's an indication, Phil, that there's a lot of battling yet to do.
Well, it's a little bit surprising to see it quite in such a mess at this early stage of the race. Zabel just waiting for a run at the hill here, letting them all get on with it, and then he'll have a go. There's no point in starting and then having to walk again. So you've got to take your hat off to Eric. The last time he completed this race, he finished 11th in 2006, and he was 4th in 2005 when he tried desperately to win the race. Having won over 200 races, he's never won this one.
Well, he is a star. He's a great bike rider and a fantastic personality as well. I think a little bit unfortunate for Zabel to have that flat tyre at the wrong place, but he's being phlegmatic about it. If he catches himself back into the race, fine, all well and good.
He knows all about it. And look at the riders walking up there. Goodness me, now this their race is probably done already, Paul.
Well, the reason is they're keeping themselves nice and alert at the front end of the main field, but they know this is not yet the moment to make a big move. They've got themselves now around about 10 kilometres before the next climb of the day, and that is going to be the Wolvenberg, and that's quite a nasty little climb. A rider here from Team Skill has managed to slip off the front, and this looks like Kenny van Hommel.
Well, if he's trying to get up to the leaders, that is going to be a bit of an effort. They're saying it's Robert Wagner. Yes, it is. It's Robert 238, in fact. It is Robert Wagner who has got clear of the field. Well, he's done well to get away over the confusion. I presume he's away, because meanwhile, back on the Molenberg, it's still total chaos. And imagine how far these riders are now behind. And the only reason you're seeing the photographs is because our camera bike is stuck behind them as well.
Well, I think the important thing is you have to understand they started the Molenberg as a complete main field, and these guys, once they go over the top, will have lost themselves between a minute and 30 seconds in the space of only 483 kilometres.
Yes, that's right. And the rider there from Barlow World, Marco Gotti, being pushed along by anybody that will give him a helping hand. He just simply cannot get the bike going, and same too applies here to Sergei Lagutin, the rider we saw crash earlier on today.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten in between these two sections of cobbled climbs that the Molenberg and the Wolvenberg fill is actually a very long cobblestone section of around about 3 kilometers, and that is the Kerkegate, and that is going to be a very difficult next 10 kilometers of racing. And look at the panic now on board in the main field as riders scramble to get back to the peloton.
Some will get back, not all now. A lot of those we've left on the climb will not see the peloton today. They're out of it for sure. And there's a big group here. We're going to be 140, 150 strong still. Not too sure now where that skilled rider was, but I'm pretty sure he was off the front. Robert Wagner. These slab concrete roads here.
Very dangerous because most of them were laid many years ago, and as they've settled through the rainy parts of the seasons in Belgium, they've left gaps in between. They tried to seal them up with tar, but there's always occasions when you'll find this gap which is just comfortably enough size for a front tyre to slip down into, and that's when we get nasty accidents.
Still Lamprey trying to keep on top of this and looking as though that they have a real chance of controlling it. There he is, he's off the front for sure, and he's trying to bridge the gap, because as far as we know, and we've lost contact with Radio 2 at the moment, the 4 riders are still clear, albeit by just 30 seconds at the start of the Molenberg. I don't think they were bridged.
Well, that's a little move for him to try and get across the gap. He's going to find himself in no man's land. The 4 leaders are still looking to survive, I think, to the next climb of the day. I don't think they will survive up to the summit of the Haut du Quaremont, which the riders will reach at 185 kilometers into the race. Again, there you can see Frédéric Guédon is the rider from FDJ there in the white jersey, former winner of Paris-Roubaix, and of course great winner of Paris Tours as well. And even though he's getting on to 36 years of age, he's still a very competitive athlete.
25 seconds he is. They're just behind the leaders now, that lone rider Wagner, and probably about 10 or 15 seconds ahead of the pack, who've turned off again now, because the challenge is not the leaders, the challenge is the topography of the country, and so they're waiting for the next one now. And after the Molenberg is the Wolvenberg, and it's a little way away, so that's the next battleground.
Well, it's the big acceleration and deceleration as they get to the important strategic points of the race.
I must say that Guédon seemed to be enjoying it. He's feeling pretty pleased with himself. He's held his front position on that first climb. He'll be well aware of the chaos behind as riders try to rejoin.
Napolitano riding at the front as well.
This is Eric, isn't it?
Eric Zabel.
Meanwhile, a life at the back of the race here, and he's still ticking away because he's in a group here, you see. Look at the gap now they've lost here. But that might be the tail. That's not the field. There's a peloton right ahead. He's going to come back.
Well, you see, he used his intelligence there. He didn't want to stop and have to walk up the climb. He waited for the race to clear up, and he waited because he knew that there would be a slowing down in the main field. A seasoned professional, he knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want to panic. If I come back in a race like this, it's going to be good luck. If not, well, then I'll go and take an early shower. But there he is in the dark raincoat, just sitting at the back end of the main field. These, a number of years ago, were the kinds of race that Eric Zabel really did enjoy.
Just hearing now, the peloton is now a minute 30 back, so they've really shut down again. Nice little bit of Flemish heritage there in the field as the riders go by, and they're probably celebrating the return of Eric Zabel, who was once knocked off by a horse, in fact, in this area when he rode in Ghent-Wevelgem. They're all rejoining. That peloton is building. They'll have lost only a handful of riders, I think, by the end of the day on the first climb. A little bit more effort just required to close the gap. Never easy.
The important thing to do, though, is if you are a rider like Eric Zabel, this is a problem at the back there, and one of the riders from FDJ, and that, in fact, is Mathieu Ladagnou, who's passing the wheel across to, must probably be Philippe Gilbert, I would think, for the panic to be like this.
It looks like him, but we can't see his number nor his face right now. His legs look like Philippe Gilbert.
I would have a guess this is Gilbert, because they certainly would have tried to help him. It is Gilbert.
Yeah.
Now, that was bad luck for him, but you see, because the team cars were so far behind, the only solution in a situation like this is to take a wheel from a teammate. They've got the wheel across. The team cars now are starting to filter their way back into contact, and I think Gilbert will find himself very shortly in the main field. This is the next section of cobblestones at Kerkegate, 3,000 meters, 3 kilometers or 2 miles in length. Nice cobblestones, but you will see the main field accelerate over them, and again breaking into the lead of these men, who actually, again, Phil has managed to stretch up to around about a minute and 25 seconds.
Yeah, and it's because the peloton aren't hunting the 4 leaders. They're just replying to the challenge of the day, which is the countryside right now. These 4 boys working well together. They get the best shot at seeing where they're going, of course. We've still got Wagner in between, and I'm sure now that the rider at the back here, Tom Velers, knows that his teammate is chasing, so he may not help that breakaway until his teammate joins.
Well, there you can see a rider from F de Jeu, Francis de Jeu, has dropped back. This is the panic on the right-hand side, and you can see immediately, once Ladagnou had seen the problem, even though Ladagnou, number 84, has been involved in an accident himself, he stayed in contact with the race, and he's trying to help his teammate back. One of the other riders here, this is Johan Ofredo, who's dropped back to look after the chances of Philippe Gilbert as well. But I think the fact that we've got a couple of corners here is going to allow Philippe Gilbert to get back into the main field, but not necessarily at an ideal point as they start the next section of cobblestones, the Kerkegate. He'll be starting that section right at the back of the field.
Yes, and he's going to find himself, he's going to have to pick his way through there for sure, because otherwise it won't be as bad as going uphill, but it's still going to rattle him. And he knows all about these roads, by the way, because although he rides on a French team, he is in fact a Belgian, although he's a Walloon rather than a Flamand. He comes from the Liège area, and he speaks French as a first language rather than Flemish, but he's back in the race.
And look how far away the front end of the main field is when you're sitting here. They're an awful long way round the corner. From the front end of the main field to the back end of the main field on a day like this, you're probably looking at a good 45 seconds. There is Philippe Gilbert. Now, he mustn't panic at a time like this. This is the time where you may well find yourself have an accident. He's got a number of teammates alongside him. They need to wait now for a nice open section of road to try and move him up to the front.
Yeah, he's just got to live with this now for 3,000 metres, because he won't make a lot of progress. He's come back on, though, that's very important. And he's living through the best start of the season he's ever had in his career, Gilbert. We wouldn't normally say this is a race to suit Philippe, but when you're on great form, things can go very well.
Well, he's an interesting rider because not only does he ride well in the Ardennes classics like Liège-Bastogne-Liège and the Flèche Wallonne, but he does enjoy these tough Flandrian races. Of course, he was the winner of the Het Volk, but this race, I think, is not something which is completely and utterly outside his ability.
Oh, absolutely right. Lampe still confident that the rider who wears number 1, Alessandro Ballan, is going to deliver at the finish today. He certainly loves the area of Belgium, and he's done well in this race. There's the Belgian flag flying now. No Belgian riders evident just for the moment, but there's plenty of them here, not least Tom Bonen, and we've seen him occasionally. This is the split now in the breakaway. Tom Velers is going off the back there, along with Jérôme Vincent, I think it is. No, it's not, it's just the other guy, it's Sven Renders. He's giving up the here,
and the weather again changing. It's going to be looking out at the finish line. The sunshine is here. It's clear blue skies, but obviously out in the Flanders, those showers are coming through and making the cobblestones very damp. And I think these two guys, Phil, they've raised the white flag now, and I think they realise that it's pretty much all but over. They know what is happening in the main field, so I think it's time out for them.
Yes, well, there's still an awful long way to go, and they're cognizant of that fact, but of course, if the legs decide enough is enough, enough is enough for these boys, continuing good tempo. It's a pity we can't, because the roads are so narrow, we can't get down and see who's actually at the head of that peloton just at the moment. These two riders are now setting the pace. There's the spur wheels and the spectators again. I think it's still illegal, even in modern day cycling, to take those wheels.
Well, this is André Greipel at the back end of the main field, the leader of the World Cup. He too now is not enjoying the slippery conditions over these cobblestones.
He's not, he's losing ground here. As he moves down the back, he looks cool enough, but he must be thinking now, a successful defence of that jersey. He should keep it, because he got 65 points, I think it was, and there's only 50 up for grabs today, so he should still lead by the end of the day anyway.
Well, in the complicated points situation of the World Cup, he actually won himself points on the individual
That's
stages
how he made the
well,
difference. Yes, that's
to give himself that rather strange leading figure of 62. But as you say, I'm not sure he's going to get too many points on a race like today. You can see the concentration now coming into all of these riders' faces. They realise now we're getting into the very important strategic part of the race. Kop van der Wegstrijd on the left-hand side, the leaders of the race. It's now down to just two riders, with the main field, the peloton, on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, with most of the main contenders there, all of them staying right up at the front end here on this very long section of cobblestones, the Kerkegate.
A lot of concentration on those riders now. They'll all be feeling pretty pleased with themselves. Johan van Sommeren off to the right of our picture there. Pretty pleased with themselves, the fact they're controlling the head of the field and not having to combat the nervous centre of the peloton. And they're not going to give this position up very easily, I can tell you.
Just caught a glimpse there in around about 10th or 12th position. In fact, it was Oscar Freire, who is a very good Spanish rider, formerly 3 times champion of the world, and pretty dominant in Milan-San Remo, and he may well put things to right with the Spanish riders' performances in the Ronde van Vlaanderen over the last few years, because he too could be looking for a podium position. This is what the Ronde van Vlaanderen is all about. Now look at the rain coming down. You can see the puddles at the side of the road. This is a man's race, Phil. This is seriously what the Ronde van Vlaanderen is all about.
And you know that an awful lot of riders enjoy this situation. This is what they want, is a very hard race. And they know that there'll be a lot of riders in this field today will not be wanting this race like this. And people like Tom Bonen may not like it either, but certainly there are others who will love it. And the soaking fields here, and now it is absolutely tippling down, making those cobblestones like a skating rink.
Well, I'm not sure if there's not a little bit of snow and sleet mixed into that weather coming down here. They had actually forecast snow. That looks like the skilled rider coming halfway across the gap there. Now he moved away a little bit earlier. That is Robert Wagner. He is at around about 30 seconds, but I think he's probably, Phil, only about 30 seconds in front of the main field.
Most unpleasant moments. It is in fact sleeting here. It was forecast. Everybody thought on Friday, when we had a spring-like day with temperatures running up into the mid-60s, that they must have been joking in the weather centre, but they were right. The snow was coming, and it's here, and it's blowing over the Tour of Flanders here. It'll only last a few minutes, but they of course turns those cobblestones into a very treacherous surface indeed. Riders now have another little hazard to contend with. See the massive crowd. What other sporting event in the world draws crowds like this in weather like this? The only thing in the favour is it's a free show.
Well, I have to say, another sporting event that you and I went to in the early part of the year had weather conditions just like this. The Amgen Tour of California pulled in around about 1.6 million spectators, and who would have expected it when the weather was probably the worst that the race had ever seen.
Down the Pacific Coastal Highway there, right into San Luis Obispo, it was dreadful, but the crowds are as big as they are today here in the Tour of Flanders, and that race of course grows in stature every year. Maximum 17.3% now, Paul, as we head on to the Wolfenberg.
Yep, the Wolfenberg, only 645 metres in length. It doesn't sound very much, does it? But when you realise you've got a 17% maximum for an average of an 8% grade, it is a little bit of a difficult climb. The riders are realising now that they're getting into the serious part. Once they go over the top of the Wolfenberg, they've got another long section of cobblestones to head into, the Kattenberg, but they all realise, more importantly, in around about 20 kilometres time, we'll be looking at the Haut de Quaremont.
You can hear Paul licking his lips here. He can't wait for that to happen. He suffered over it himself, of course. Now he's delighted when others do the same. As we now
well, I have to tell you, I actually used to enjoy the Haut de Quaremont. I like the battle to get into the bottom of the climb, because the important thing about these climbs is if you can get into the first 10 or 15 places, you actually end up, and everybody ends up riding at their own speed. So it's actually the battle before sometimes which is more difficult than the actual climb itself.
That's the skill. Again, it's all about holding position, but you need strength and courage to hold the front of the peloton before the climb starts. A little bit easier for position for these two riders. And it certainly looks here as though Tombak is a bit too strong here by Vincent at the moment.
Well, I have to say, Phil, at the start this morning in Bruges, I didn't think there was a huge crowd turning out to see the Ronde van Vlaanderen, but here out on the open road, the crowds are as big as they are normally.
Well, it's huge by normal standards, but not by perhaps what we expect. And you're right, the crowd seemed bigger than ever out on course. Maybe that's where they all went to today. Here's the peloton.
Third rider in the line there in the orange jersey, that's Juan Antonio Fletcher, looking very concentrated, riding up to the front end of the peloton. He would really like to be the first Spaniard ever to win this bike race. This is the climb again for the main field now on the Wolfenberg. 17% of the maximum part, but this isn't a bad climb because it's not a cobblestone climb, it's a nice smooth climb. The race being controlled there on the right hand side by Team Milram. You get a chance to see how difficult this road is. Team Slipstream Chipotle also got to ride up on the left-hand side. I haven't seen very much of Maggie Backstedt. Backstedt not wearing the normal team colours. In fact, he's the champion of Sweden, so his jersey, if you get a chance to spot it, will be blue and yellow.
That's the same colour as the flag.
Correct. Well spotted. Swedish national colours.
This is life again at the back here. One or two riders here from the Slipstream Chipotle team. Just bringing up the rear at the moment. Fletcher, by the way, terrific positioning for him up front just now. He had a magical early season last year, 2 second places. He'd only wished they were first. He was second in Het Volt, the first classic of the year in Belgium, very close to where we're racing today, and second in Paris-Roubaix, which again was it equalled the finest ever position. It was Poblet back in 1953 when he finished second, and no Spanish rider reached that till last year when Fletcher got on board and equalled the position of Poblet. So the win is all he wants now to become the finest Spanish finisher. That, of course, will be next week in Paris-Roubaix.
Well, he could certainly do that. He's a great, tough competitor, not had any problems so far this season. Really is turning out to be, as they said beforehand, and this morning we could hardly believe it when we looked at the blue skies. It was going to be a nasty day.
Sorry about that, Paul. I was watching the Liquigas rider who lost complete control of his back wheel on that bend, managed to straighten it up in time. I thought we were about to see a few go down.
Well, everybody now alert and nervous as they get themselves around this corner. Now, how about that? You know, that's about a 45-degree back on yourself bend that these riders have to negotiate, and that's why you have to stay at the front end of the main field. The front group, which was 4 riders long now, is down to a single rider, chased by a single rider. 2 men who were in the leading group of 4, and then Robert Wagner halfway across. But very shortly, I think, once we get to the Old Quaremont, that's all going to change.
Well, Wagner is just 18 seconds behind the 2 dropped riders, including his teammate Tom Wieler's. So if he can just bridge them, he might well find that they'll lift themselves and go back up to the 2 leaders as a group of 3. Either way, it's all a waste of time, let's face it, because the peloton will wipe them out eventually towards the end of the race. At least some of the peloton will. These narrow roads here. I remember when I first came to live in Belgium, I lived here for 6 weeks and it rained every day.
Yes, it can be nasty when the rain comes down in the early part of the season, and you can have months without seeing the sunshine. It can be a very dreary and miserable place, but when the sun does come out, it's a great place to come for a bike race, especially this area where we are here now, because this is a very undulating part of the Flanders, and it can be very tough if you could search out and find the nasty climbs that the Tour of Flanders manages to do.
So they're still the same up front. 2 leaders out in front, followed by the 2 chasers, dropped by the break, and then the lone rider, then the peloton, and that's the spread on the field here. Except they're trying to reshape the front here, the peloton now.
There's Wim van Zevenant on the front there for Team Silence Lotto. He's the sacrificial lamb there, of course, for Lief Hoster a little bit later on in the day. They're just dropping down here into the town of Eename and Edelare, which is where the cobblestone section of the Kattenberg is, and that's where we are currently. Van Zevenant just looking over his shoulder, just seeing the damage that he's done to the front end of the main field. Calm the ardour a fraction, young man, because it's all going to happen, I'm sure, on the Oude Quaremont.
Well, that's where we're bound for, but not quite yet. We're over the Wolvenberg now. Next up, the Oude Quaremont. We'll go out into the country to find it. Eename is the town, a little bit of smooth road, and that sharp left-hand turn. Most of the riders getting back at the back of the field here. Rabobank just keeping Fletcher right on the sharp end, ready for the Old Quaremont, because that could be where the first selection is about to be made.
Well, there will be a split. Certainly there'll be a battle to get into the first corner of the Oude Quaremont. Then you've got a slightly twisty road until the cobbles start. Just looking over there, you can see Johan van Summeren sitting up a little bit further back. The gap between the front racer and the front end of the main field now is down to just 40 seconds. And that's amazing because they're not really chasing at all here. Have a look at the back end of the main field. Problem there over on the right there for a rider from Liquigas. I didn't quite sure who it was exactly.
I think it's Frederik Willems, actually.
I think it was Willems. There you can see, that's the town of Oudenaarde. There's the town square in the middle. You can see the belfry. And in fact, Oudenaarde is the home to the museum of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Very well worth a visit if you get a chance.
It absolutely is. They've got some of the original cars in there that were used in the days gone by, some of the original bicycles, etc. It's also where the women's race started from this morning. That'll be finishing very soon, up at the same finishing line. That's a World Cup event for the women. Number 1 is Nicole Cook, the great British rider, who was the winner last year.
Well, she'll be looking to try and get herself a victory again this year if she can. And they've been opening up the route out on the course here. And that's, in fact, the addition of the women's race over the last couple of years have made it that little bit more difficult, Phil, for the spectators to get around, because the roads are closed around about an hour ahead of the men's Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Still a lot of work being done. Team High Road off to the right there.
There's Pipo Pozzato there with the flowing golden locks riding at the front end of the main field. The two leaders have got themselves back together there, Vincent Jérôme and Yannick Tombak. But I think they realise, Phil, very shortly they will be back in the main field. Again, the main field have got themselves through a strategic point, slowing down a fraction, waiting to get themselves ready for the next acceleration, which is going to come very shortly. Stuart O'Grady just popping to the front over on the left-hand side, riding a sensible race.
Yes, Stuart's moved back up to the front. Let's hope he doesn't fall off again. He's had a lot of unfortunate crashes, Stuart. When he stays good and fit, of course, he provides us with the results. And we saw him crash out terribly in last July's Tour de France on the descent of the Rosland. And a real shame, because he was on for a great tour, I think. But he's bouncing back, as he always does, the man from Adelaide. There he is at the moment. George Hincapie comes up again, second wheel here, having a chat, telling him exactly what wants to be done.
Well, Team High Road have seriously been, I think, given the nod there, Phil, by George Hincapie to move to the front end of the main field. They know what's coming up next. They've got around about 15 kilometres before they get to the Old Quaremont. They'll leave Oudenaarde behind them. They'll go through Beveren, Lupegem, and then into Berchem, and that's where the big climb starts.
Just look at this absolute chaos as they start to make the turn here. I can tell you now that Judith Arndt has just won, and that's a big victory for the American Team High Road. I'm not surprised she was delighted. She's just crossed the line in first place in the women's event on the same finish line as the men. So a good victory for Judith Arndt.
And in fact, Nicole Cook came in at the back end of that group, a little bit further back.
Looking down the road then, the rain is with us, I'm afraid. Again, I don't know how long it will last. It's still quite nice at the finishing line of the Tour of Flanders. These are the two survivors of the breakaway.
Well, they're surviving not by very much as we look back. There's a rider coming across. In fact, there are two riders coming across the gap here, and I wonder if it is Wagner or if it's still his teammate.
I think it's the original two coming back here, and I thought Wagner would have joined them, but it looks like he's never quite closed that gap, which was down to about 15 seconds. But these are the two riders who were originally with the break, I think.
Yep, they are. They're going to reform at the front end of the main field, making a four-man leading group, with Wagner still hovering, they say, at around about the 15-second mark.
So Wielers, Renders, Vincent and Tombak are all back together again. Chance to use our caption again, which the caption operator had generated a while ago, probably thought for the last time, into Oudenaarde.
This is the town square in Oudenaarde, a very nice town square, very much reminiscent of a real typical Flandrian scene, and made more typical, I suppose, Phil, by the snow that seems to be coming down, the temperature dropping to around about 0 degrees. Funnily enough, as we drove down here to the finish line this morning, the car temperature was registering a very healthy 12 degrees Celsius. It's certainly not that now.
That's right, around about 56 degrees Fahrenheit, and then once the snow comes, it just plummets and it goes to little above 40, 45. And these riders at least have got a bit of a sweat on right now, so that should help. Just when we're actually on top of the museum here as we head down. The Centrum Ronde van Vlaanderen is the street here, by the way, is called the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat. So it all happens in Oudenaarde.
It all comes together here. This is, as you said, where the women's race started from. That's all finished now, but this, for me, is really just about to start. They're heading down there through the magnificent backdrop there on either side of the road of the daffodils that have come out in the early part of the season. And now we have to think about who is going to be the man to make the first selection once we come to the Old Quaremont, followed by the Paterberg, followed by the Koppenberg. Big climbs are still to come.
I'm just wondering why on earth Robert Wagner never caught up with his two teammates. He was only just behind them, and it was the obvious thing was to go forward. It must mean that his actual teammate Tom Wielers could never have known he was chasing, otherwise he would have allowed him up so they could have gone up and made 5.
Well, you know, he was into 18 seconds deficit at one stage, and now the race referee is just saying that he's hovering at 22 seconds. I think he got halfway across the gap and then he hit the wall. He just couldn't close down that last little bit.
As I see Rabobank have manipulated themselves, quite a few riders at the front there. They're saying it's all for one today. They're racing for Fletcher. They believe in him. They think he has the ability, and he's certainly delivering at the moment.
Well, he is, and everybody's starting to get that little bit nervous now. They've got themselves over a few climbs, but they realise this is the time when you've got to be very attentive and make sure you don't get caught at the back end of the main field and don't have to waste energy chasing back into the peloton, as Eric Zabel did a few moments ago with a very badly timed flat tyre. Zabel is comfortably back in the main field, and I'm sure he will have used all of his experience to weasel his way through the peloton and get back up to the front.
Last man around the corner there was Bastiaan Gilling from the Van der Schoonen team of Cycle Skolstrop. This is another Sonia Duval rider here now trying to bridge away from the field. The thing is, the riders are never in the same direction for more seemingly than a kilometre or so before they change direction again. This all leads to a very hard pace.
Well, if you've not ridden this bike race before, we're now moving into a very complicated part of the route, because you're right, you're zigzagging now through the Flanders, crossing fields to try and find the next climb of the day. You're one moment going east, then west, then north and south, and if you don't know your way around here, you really have no idea where you're going to or coming from.
This is the chaos which will ensue throughout the rest of the day here now.
That was Stuart O'Grady just going through the team cars. I think he'd just been back to have a quick chat with the team management there.
Confident. That's the best thing to do at the moment. Sorry about the bit of camera bag up here. The trees are affecting the pictures just at the minute.
A few riders from Team CSC had slipped off the back end. I think maybe they're taking advantage of this slight lull in the tempo, Phil, to have what they would probably call a natural break. And there is Fabian Cancellara as well.
Yeah, there's definitely been a group decision here to take time out. They're coming back nicely, but they're confident enough to do this. They've obviously sensed a slowing down of the peloton just a little bit for the moment. Last man up there looked as though it was Baden Cook again, so he's picked the right wheels, and his mate Stewie, so well, they're good friends off the bike.
They certainly are good friends off the bike, but as you can see, I think we're starting to get some seriousness at the front end of the main field again. They've gone through Oudenaarde, and they've got, by my calculation now, about 14 kilometres to go to the start of the Old Quaremont, which is why you can see this seriousness starting to come into the field.
Well, they've tried to chase away off the front, but they've also tried to shut it down at the back here, so the pressure is very much on here. I think the next time check we'll find that we're going to bring back that leading group, because there's a 5 or 6 man break trying to get clear.
Frédéric Guédon is riding there in third position. I think seriously here this afternoon he will probably be looking after the hopes of Philippe Gilbert, because he's definitely the man on form for Française des Jeux, and definitely the man who would love to win this race. As you said, although he's a French-speaking Belgian, this is a big race for the Belgians. It's not only the biggest bike race in the country, it's actually also the biggest attended sporting event of the year.
Just looking at the way this breakaway is forming here, individual team riders leaving a lot of riders behind to block off, and that could mean this breakaway might start to go clear here now.
Well, this is one of those silly little moves that seems to form when somebody lets a gap go in the front end of the main field, and that is what is happening. They're looking over the shoulders. They've seen the possibility of a gap. The Lampre rider there, formerly a lead-out man for Mario Cipollini, is Paolo Fornaciari. He's a big, strong bike rider, very happy, and having a great laugh at the start this morning when he could see his team leader, Alessandro Ballan, being interviewed in Flemish with the Italian responses.
Oh, it's been a crash here. We're going back down the field. This looks like a rather heavy fall. Sonia Duval is down. Astana sat on the roadside.
And the rider from Quick-Step has gone down as well. Just looking there, the rider from Crédit Agricole,
Engoulevent.
Jimmy Engoulevent, went down quite hard. There's a rider from Quick-Step. Now that doesn't look too good.
Unlucky for some. Stephen de Jong, that's
number
a serious
13.
fall there. Yes, very sad.
It looks Stephen de Jong, we've followed his career for a long time since we watched him racing in Australia, and it's sad to see somebody go down quite so hard. Not so good for Tom Bonen either to lose an ally like that. Now this is our man who's come across the gap here, and I think he's just about to make the junction here. Robert Wagner finally, after a very long chase, makes it 5 in the lead.
The final composition by Robert Wagner as he gets up. We've now got 5 riders in the lead. It might all happen a little bit too late on, because that crash will inspire some chases, but 5 for the moment, and 2 riders from Skill Shimano, so they're warranting their wild card efforts around the country, especially for the organisers of the Tour de France, ASO. They haven't got an invite to the Tour de France as far as I know, but they're in their other events.
Another little move there as we look at the replay of this acceleration just a few moments ago. This, I think, prolonging the agony here, Phil, because you can see the main field, they're basically just staring at this guy saying, look, we know what's coming up next. We know it's the Old Quaremont very shortly. We're not too far away from the Oudenaarde Barn or the Oudenaarde Street, and that's when they'll start to accelerate. And and try and get to the front with the start of this climb. Again, a little engine at the back there, a rider from Boyd Telecom. It really is all starting to happen.
See, they slip off the concrete, and just bordering the concrete are these little cobblestones, and they're all laced with mud. You can see it there. If you lose the ground, you're in trouble. And this rider here is Putsep Erki. Oh, they're saying it must be 58. I thought it was 56. So it's Frank Renier.
Quite sure where this guy thinks he's going here at the moment. He's got himself 2 meters 50 off the front end of the main field, and they're all looking at each other, probably saying the same thing. Where do you think you're going, young man? Because we ain't giving any tickets out right now.
No, we're all thinking of the next climb, which will be hill number 5 of 17, the old Quadamont, and that's where it's going to start for sure. And you can almost feel the atmosphere here now. As he looks over his shoulders, he may as well wait, or at least he's holding a good position at the head of the field. But they're all sitting there, they're all massing. Liquigas quite clearly confident that they have Pizzato in the thick of the action. Français Jeux got Gilbert as their leader. They're up there as well.
Stuart O'Grady a little while back in the cars, up in the front 10 or 15 places there. You can see him just popping through. Very serious, Stuart O'Grady. Christophe Mongin in the white jersey there and the glasses, former French and national cyclo-cross champion. FDJ riding carefully at the front end of the main field. Team Slipstream Chipotle are represented at the front here as well. There is Eric Zabel.
How
you
did
see,
he do that? Incredible.
Tactics and knowledge of the terrain have certainly helped him get himself back up to the front. Great competitor.
Superb. Oh, superb riding by the old man of the peloton, Eric Zabel. There he is in the blue and the black top. Always alert, looking around, to tremendous skill, but not just skill, a huge effort there to close the gap and now resituate himself at the head of the race. That's terrific. He knows where he's got to be. It's a matter of being able to do it, because once we get on to the Haute Quaramont, the race is certain to fragment.
Well, that's a typical view of the Flanders here, and there's a typical view of the Flanders at this time of the year. You can just see how damp and nasty it is out there. But these guys are not even worrying about the weather conditions here. They're worrying about the older Quaramont. There is Stijn de Volder, the national champion, formerly with Team Discovery Channel. Over to the right-hand side, another quick step rider moving forward. That's all for Tom Bonen here this afternoon. Philippe Gilbert in the middle, in the white jersey with the clubs on it. That is the Français des Jeux. Cofidis.
Just looking at the weather here, Paul, it's all started to go a little bit wrong for them again in the weather stakes. And the Cofidis riders here, there's Chavanel and Kevin de Vert. So Sylvain Chavanel is having a great start of the year. Frank Hoy, I think, is in there as well.
There's Bonen just over on the right-hand side. He's very alert as well, and he's riding comfortably at the front end of the main field. He will revel in conditions like this. I can't believe, Phil, the weather conditions out on the course, because on the finish line
it's fine.
It's still absolutely dry. But what the weather people told us this morning was it was going to be like this. We were going to get rain, snow, hail, and it certainly has come true.
Well, they're getting it, that's for sure, as it started to hail again here. Most unpleasant conditions now. These boys are well out of it at the head of the race. It looks only 4 of them. We've left. Oh, was he just peeping in? I think he's just peeping into our off camera here.
Well, I think they're about to see themselves pulled back into the main field. It's been a long escapade. They've got themselves a little bit of television time for the sponsors here this afternoon, but now that the race is about to start in earnest, they're about to see the big guns come out to play.
Well, you wouldn't think it was spring looking at the trees right now, because it's hardly time to pop those leaves.
We're looking at about 10 seconds advantage for these guys. The last time check we got was 1 minute and 8 seconds, and then it was 33 seconds, and now it's almost over. 2.8 kilometers to go to the Haute Quaramont. As you said, the 5th climb of the day. It's 2.2 kilometers in length. The average gradient is only 4%, but it's 12% at the bottom, and it's 1,600 meters of cobblestones.
And it's narrow, and it's high hedges around the side of it. There is a coffee shop on the top for those who wish to stop and call an end to the day, but I think most of them will continue on as they still try to all come back together.
Well, there's the catch, and we, since the early part of the day, for the first time, are looking at what the Italians would call a gruppo compacto.
Well, they chased so hard over those last few kilometres that the boys up front really didn't have much of an option there. As we've got big Johan van Sommen, those long, lanky legs of his. He's a driver, he really is.
Well, there you go. They've just said it in French now, regroupement général, and now is when the Général Van Sommeren on the front here is starting to take over. There you can see the big rider from Team Quickstep is looking after his big teammate Tom Bonen. That was Gert Steegmans in the blue jersey. On the right-hand side is Bonen. Now this is almost, Phil, resplendent of a sprint finish.
Just look at it. It's a virtual race finish just to get to the turn onto the old Quaremont. And now they've got to brake very hard, and it looks a little bit glacial down there. Tight fit on the right-hand side of the picture.
And look at the cobblestones just to make it a little bit more nasty as well.
And now we see the boys at the back having to slow up, slow down, and make a hugely different effort to stay with the race.
Well, we're about 2 kilometres to go. You can see Team Silencer Lotto all over the front end of the main field. Team Predictor Lotto it was last year. There's a problem at the back here for a rider from Lotto, and now he is going to have a hard time getting himself back in. What a bad place to have had a flat tyre.
I had a flat tyre. He made a complete mess of his gears there, but anyway, he's left behind. His two teammates are driving on, led by Van Sommeren here. Hats off to Tom Bonen, the winner of this race twice, looking today to join the all-time greats with 3. He's tucked in at the front.
Well, let's have a look and see if there was an incident at the back here. In fact, just after the corner, that's when the Lotto rider had the problem, stopped in the middle of the road. I think something must have happened to his bike. But he's up and riding again. But at the front end of the main field here, you've got the big names. Alessandro Ballan moving up there. There is Tom Bonen, Gert Steegmans, Leif Hoster. All the big men, Phil, have realised that this is the important part of the race. You've got to get around those corners, get yourself into the front 10 or 15 places, because there's no acceleration. And Mr. Personality over on the left-hand side there, at the front end of the field, Erik Zabel with the blue, with the black raincoat on.
If you took 10 years off his age, they'd everybody be worried to death about him. He's had 1 win already this year. Eric, by the way, he's heading up. He'll be 38 years old. Joined the Tour de France this July, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him in that race just one more time. And now he's right back on the sharp end. His head and his legs are still in unison, which is terrific.
Well, as you can see here, this is the flat part of the Olde Quaremont here. There is absolutely nowhere at all that you can accelerate and get yourself to the front end of the main field, which is why we had such a great battle. Obviously, Erik Zabel is in great form. You know, if you were ever a supporter of Sean Kelly as a bike rider, or Laurent Jalabert, the next man you have to support has got to be Erik Zabel, because this is the master of longevity and the master, I suppose, Phil, of dedication to the sport.
And the man with the most wins currently racing, of course. He's got over 200 victories to his career now. His career started back in 1992, where most professionals we talk about having a career of 8 years. Here's a man here, been a pro since 92. We're looking now at the head of the field here. They have caught the 4-man break of the day. They're all together. They've fought valiantly to hold front position. Hincapie is up near the leaders. Erik Zabel's peeping into the left of our picture. Also up at the front here is Tom Bonen and Alessandro Ballan, last year's winner. Look how narrow the road is. This is now the approach to the old Quaremberg.
Olde Quaremont it is, in fact. And I tell you what, all of the big names moving up to the front. It was a massive battle to get in here. Here is the acceleration starting right now. They're onto the cobblestones. This is the steepest part of the Olde Quaremont. There's 1.6 kilometres of cobblestones, although the climb itself is 2.2 kilometres in length. The steepest part, Phil, is right here at 11.6%. And this is where the race normally splits up for the first time. And once they go over the summit of this climb in 4 kilometres, they got another nasty climb called the Paderstraat.
Which is why they'll keep the pressure on. We're already hearing calls from the race cars behind that riders are stopping at the rear of the peloton. We may not see pictures of that, but the riders on the front now are tapping out the rhythm, and this is already beginning to split the field. It looks like we've got Fletcher in second place for Rabobank.
Well, we talked at the start about the weather conditions. At the start, the weather was pretty fine. At the finish here, there is no rain on the ground, but out on the course, as you can see, it's raining intermittently. There's a bit of snow coming down. Now and again, there are hailstones, and that is battering onto the riders' bodies and their legs and thighs, and you can see the wind rippling in the flags of Flanders there. This is going to be a tough test. This is making the race, which is a tough race to start with, even more difficult.
Well, Team High Road have got control of the breakaway and at the head of the peloton just behind. Hincapie has held a very good position. They'll take a lot of confidence in the team riding from that. Just take a look at those cobblestones now, because this is how difficult they are at this stage of the race. I think it's Westphal who's there for the Gerolsteiner team. And there's the steep part at the moment.
Well, there's a little cafe that Phil always talks about over on the left-hand side there, but there's not very many people here stopping for a little cup of coffee here this afternoon. Now, this to me, Phil, is always the toughest part here of the older Quaremont, because this is the town of Quaremont, and it now drags up in a false flat for about 1.2 kilometers. What makes it more difficult is not really the gradient, it's the fact that you've got a very nasty wind battering across the road, making it difficult for the riders. Looks like Thomas Weitkus here on the front here for Team Astana, not selected yet for the Tour de France, and they're hoping to allow their legs to do the talking over the next few months and try and persuade the organisation ASO to let them into the race with the defending champion Alberto Contador and the defending third place finisher Levi Leipheimer.
Well, this is the tempo we expected on the Quaremont, and this is where it is starting to split up. It's only a 4-star. The hills are judged 1 to 5 stars, by the way. The Muur, the wall at Kapelmuur, the church wall, that gets 5 stars. Hill number 16, the last climb, the Bosberg, gets 4 stars, probably because it's a strategic position near the end. But you're looking out along what are most certainly now the bleak fields of Flanders here, as the Tour of Flanders is pulled out into a long straight line. Every man for himself, even if they are riding shoulder to shoulder, as they try to control this race. They came to the foot of the climb all together.
Riding up at the front there in second position is Tom Bonen, I can see, followed by Leif Hoste. There's the acceleration on the older Quaremont and the pressure coming down from Team Astana. Johan Bruneel, Phil said to me yesterday, no pressure on my squad here this afternoon. All we're going to do is ride a race to enjoy it. We may well look out for Gusev down towards the end because he's a tough competitor, but looking over his shoulder here, he can see the damage that's being done, and coming across, that looks to me as if it may well be an acceleration from Leif Hoste.
The old Quaremont, and it looks as though it is Leif Hoste. The man has finished second on 3 occasions, trying to get up with the leaders here. Now that is going to cause a lot of riders here now to react to this man who is on a mission. He's trying desperately to replace the memories of 3 second places with a win, going up towards the leaders, checking on seeing just what's going on here as he joins the leaders now. And we've got 4 riders clear.
Well, in fact, as they go through the feeding station here, you can see the little acceleration coming across. This is the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat, and that was an acceleration coming across there by Tom Bonen, who's come up to make this a 5-man leading group with Johan van Sommeren as well. So Leif Hoste has got himself a little bit of friends there, and as you can see, the main field scrambling to stay in contact.
Well, I think it's reasonable to say now that the Tour de Flanders has taken a couple of hours, but now it has really begun. And that is a group now led by Johan van Sommeren here, trying to organise something special. Well, we expected this would be where the race would start today, and it is certainly seeming to be the case.
Well, it's important to keep the pressure on. You see the older Quaremont once again has split up the main field. We're looking down there at a group of maybe 15 riders. Everybody else is now scrambling to get back into contact because you've got Hoste there, and this is a little bit further back. You see the damage has been done because the remnants of the main field are still just getting to the top of the summit of the old Quaremont.
Well, that's a big chunk of riders out of the race right now. This peloton here is about to repair itself, but when it gets together, you've probably got no more than 50 riders here as they're coming slowly back together, all under the impetus of the drivers at the front. And the strong men want this peloton to be much smaller now so they can concentrate on the race, get rid of the nervous energy.
Well, you can see that little gaggle of riders at the front. They've done the damage there. Just getting themselves together, and they don't want to set the tempo right now, but they know they're nice and safe because in about 2.5 kilometers they've got another very nasty climb, the Paterberg itself, a steep climb with a maximum gradient of 20.3%. Now that is pretty nasty.
Well, that's 1 in 5 in old money as they come over the Paterberg here. 2 kilometers to go to that climb of the day now, which will take us up to climb number 6. It's a 4-star rated climb. As Paul has said, it's got that 20% middle gradient on it.
It's not very long, you know, it's only 360 meters. The average gradient is 12.9, but these guys know how nasty it is, and I wouldn't be surprised with weather conditions like this if we don't see 1 or 2 riders actually having to get off and walk on this climb. And if they've walked up this one, they'll certainly walk up the next one, which is the Koppenberg.
Once you get wheel spin on these steep cobblestone climbs, you've got no chance. You've just got to dismount and dismount quickly or fall off. Is that
That's
a
problem?
Team High Road
Yeah,
riding?
there's another crash gone down there.
There's a guy in the field there. Goodness knows how he got over the hedge, but that's what happens. The road gets too narrow. The man on the inside clips the grass, and over he goes. It's a CSC rider too.
It is a CSC rider who's gone down there. Gives you a chance to see just how nasty it is off the side of the road here. This is going to be, and a lot of the Flemish people said this morning, a monumental Ronde van Vlaanderen this year. There's a mechanic over to the right-hand side there, and I think that rider from CSC is certainly looking for a little bit of assistance. There's the remnants of the main field. Let's just have a look. I didn't see how that happened. It happened just a little bit further back. There was an accident in the middle of the road, and the guy from CSC here, I think he had nowhere else to go.
I think he just took a dive over the hedge there and now down into the ditch. The only best part of this was he had a soft landing, but that's about where it ends, and we can't make him out at all, or his number. It looks like we're back up with him here at the moment. See if we can swing around and take a look at his face.
Well, it's hard to see his face on a day like this, so we get a big sweep as we see him.
Tell you who it isn't. Well, I'm not sure I can tell you who it is. It could be Lars Back actually, who's gone down there. It wasn't Cancellara or Carsten Kroon or Stuart O'Grady.
But you can see here, this is again a fairly small group, and this is the damage that has been done by the Old Quaremont. I always talk about the Old Quaremont as being a very important place. There's Juan Antonio Fletcher over to the left-hand side in the orange jersey of Team Rabobank. There's a rider in there from Crédit Agricole as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't Big Thor Hushovd, and riding comfortably, Tom Bonen. It's the first time we've seen him this year, Phil, riding with a desire to win.
I have to say, though, that split really was due to Van Summeren here, because he was the man that split them off on the Old Quaremont. Here we go again. And here we are on the next climb of the day now. This is the 4-star Paterberg with that steep 20% gradient right in the middle. The group is still clear from the Old Quaremont, but let's face it, Paul, it is still a very, very big group here. But Johan van Summeren driving on the front, Bonen on the right.
We are 75 kilometres to go to the finish, and you're already looking at the heads of state. Bonen, as you've said, is there on the right-hand side. There is Alessandro Balin in the pink. There is George Hincapie in the white jersey, in the white helmet. Leif Hoster is over to the left-hand side. There, in fact, in the second row as well, is Fabian Cancellara. The big boys are showing their faces at the front with 2 hours of racing still to go.
But they've no choice, because if you lose position, you lose the race. You can't shadow box in the Tour of Flanders. There is the pack now, slowly getting strength from behind. The riders in the far distance still recovering from the previous climb, the Old Quaremont. We've seen one CS rider go over into a ditch. We're not sure who he was. We think it was Lars Back. Yeah, Lars Back, who went over there, out of the race. But very impressive so far, Tom Bonen, sitting at the front here. Now he's stamping his authority on this climb as well as he comes up towards the summit. It's not very long, the climb. It was pretty steep. So first man out is Tom Bonen, looking for 3, remember, to join the greats of our time in the Tour of Flanders.
Well, that's the way to do it, to dominate the climb. There's his teammate going through, the champion of Belgium, Stijn de Volder. The difficult thing about where we are at the moment, Phil, is in just 6 kilometres from the summit of this climb, they've got to get to the summit of the Koppenberg. Again, not a very long climb, just 600 metres. It doesn't sound very much when you say it quickly, but this is a steep climb coming up next, because that is 22% the gradient at its maximum part.
And all about 50 riders are on the back heels here, just trying to repair damage rather than take part in the race, which is going to make it difficult for them. The Koppenberg is a 5-star climb. As you say, Paul, it's one of the toughest. It's well known in the Tour of Flanders, as the field here continues to rattle over the Paterberg.
Well, it's a question of survival now. It's a question of trying to get yourself back into the race once you've been tailed off the back on a climb like the Old Quaremont, and these riders here in these groups will be playing zigzag all of the time. Leif Hoster over on the left-hand side, Tom Bonen there on the right-hand side, just making contact with 1 or 2 spectators. But these men are going mano a mano, as they say in the sport of professional cycling. Number 71 there is Laszlo Bodrogi. He's better suited as a great individual time trialist. He's at the back of the group now as they go over the summit here of the Paterberg.
No lead out for Thor Hushovd from Laszlo. I don't think he's going to get back here. It was good to see the image there of George Hincapie in the second line over the top. He's concentrating well and he's riding well, and we think there might be something in George today. He's not been, apart from his stage 7 win in the Amgen Tour of California, the last day victory for him on what was a very wet day, but a terrific victory for him. we're now looking for him coming good here. Similar conditions actually, probably very, very slightly warmer, but only slightly. So we're looking down at the leaders here now as they continue to drive towards the next challenge of the day, which is the Koppenberg, and that is 5-star.
Johan van Sommeren on the frontier, looking over, just trying to figure out who is in this group. Well, I can tell you the riders we've seen so far are Fabian Cancellara, Leif Hoster, George Hincapie, and of course big Tom Bonen. It's not a very big group either. It's down to around about 20 men as we look to possibly 4 kilometers maximum until we get to the Koppenberg, and that really is a legendary climb. If we talk about the forest of Arenberg in Paris-Roubaix, then we have to talk about the Koppenberg in the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Absolutely. I make this group 35 strong, and it's being led by Stijn de Volder, the champion of Belgium. Just 35 riders. This is an indication that the guns are firing a little bit early on this year. They didn't allow the breakaway to go clear. They just gave them a minute or so. I think they only got a minute 30 was the biggest lead they got. They chased them down, not literally chased them down. The infighting brought them all back, and now the strong men try to go clear. I'd love to be in amongst it to see just who of the favourites has missed that split, but because of the nature of the course, our cameras can't get down amongst it just yet.
That is the chaos of a race like this, and the riders themselves in the individual groups, they know exactly what's going on, but watching from a distance, watching from a high spot like this, it's hard for us to know who has missed out. The guys in the groups behind now are scrambling to try and get themselves back into this race, and it really is a nightmare if you're in one of those groups, because it's like having a long piece of elastic. You pull it out as long as it'll go before snapping, and then slowly hope that it's going to pull you back into the main field. Those riders at the front will start to slow down a fraction now, giving these smaller groups behind a chance to make contact. There was again one of those little illicit bottles at the side of the road, and they will put that down to a very friendly spectator. But I can tell you one thing, it's highly organised, and talking to one or two teams, they've got riders, they've got helpers out at around about 14 places along the race route today. Not in the first 150 kilometres, but in this last 100 kilometres of racing.
And it's very necessary. It looks as though Stijn de Volder here trying to plug in his race radio, his earpiece there. He's probably covered in mud by now, I would think. He's not too sure he's receiving. Anyway, Tom Bonen riding brilliantly, dead centre of the road here. And that's a big position for him to be in. Fletcher just off to the right, he's here too. I think Gusev is also here, so some big names in this group as they head up towards the next challenge of the day. Philippe Gilbert has made this split as well.
Tell you what, Tom Bonen is actually using a very small gear. He's got a lot of suppleness in those legs, which looked absolutely huge this morning when he was standing on the presentation podium. He was looking extremely relaxed and ready to do battle on this day, and as you said a number of times, Phil, he's looking to write his name in the history books today to become one of those special riders who's won the Ronde van Vlaanderen on 3 occasions, and he's young enough to go on and win it 4 or 5 times.
Could become the outright record holder. That would make him a superstar if he isn't already here in his home country of Belgium. This is a very select group. Around about 35 men have made the first split. They're not pushing on. They know this race isn't won here, but it could be lost here. They're in a safe position to continue. They'll be concerned about who is in this group. The boys behind will start bridging gaps as fast as they can get across. I'd like to see exactly who is in there, but I have to say the race referees just now doing a great job, because they've got no cars in these gaps. They've got them all out of it, which means that it's really hard work now for the groups to close the gaps.
Well, it's also very hard work for the managers to get into those gaps, because there's hardly a place here where you can actually overtake, and that's why this is such a special race, and that's why you have to make sure that you've got a good place in the team cars behind, because once these races start to split up in the cobblestone sections, it can take you 10 to 20 kilometres to get back behind your riders to help them in case they have a flat tyre.
Well, I have to say, no sign of global warming in Belgium this winter. They've had more than their fair share of rain. As we look here at the leader of the race, which is Stijn de Volder, there's just something about André Greipel on the radio there.
Well, he's actually the leader of the World Cup after the Tour Down Under. Phil is just abandoned at the side of the road, obviously not enjoying the weather here compared to the weather he had in Adelaide in South Australia.
No points for him, but with 62 points, he can't be caught today, so he'll need to come to the finishing line to receive his next white jersey. He just got those few points for winning 4 stages to make him safe for at least this event, but next time, of course, he's going to be in trouble. The peloton continues to cut its way through the sinuous track here of the Tour de Flanders. The rain has started again. The group of 35 is swelled probably up to 50 or 60 riders just now, and nobody off the front because virtually the strong men are blocking the road here.
Well, we're looking now at the acceleration as the riders set themselves up, Phil, for the Koppenberg, winding their way through the Flanders. Just look at those fields. They are absolutely sodden in mud. It's very wet. It's been raining for over a week, and that bodes well, I think, for next week in Paris-Roubaix as well, because there we're going to have a very similar situation. This is a small group trying to get themselves back into the race. The teammates of Team Quick-Step and Silence Lotto have really got to struggle to get themselves back into the race here, because they need to be alongside their leaders in a race like this, because at the moment, currently, this is a race as if it was a race from the previous era where there is no support, there's no technical support at this point in the race, because the team cars could be almost 5 minutes behind.
Any trouble and you're out. It's 50 seconds to the next group off our picture to the leaders there, so that's a big gap now, and it could go bigger as we get on to the next climb of the day, the Koppenberg. As I say, we just heard that Andre Greipel, the World Cup leader, has stopped by the roadside and abandoned the race, so another name has gone from the event today. Your fortunes change so quickly in Flanders. You can say, I'm feeling great, I'm going well. You have a slight problem and you find you cannot catch the leaders again. Your day is over.
Well, you have to be courageous. You have to battle through those moments there when you do have a bad time. You mustn't give up. Johan Museeuw for many years had crashes and flat tires at the wrong moment, but still rode himself back into the event. Stein de Volder is at the front of this group here, and you can see still 1 or 2 riders. Little small groups of 5, 6, maybe 10 riders are returning to the front end of the main field, only to get whacked again in the head by a hammer in a short moment's time when they start the climb of the Koppenberg.
We are looking down from the helicopter now on the leading group here in the Tour de Flanders. It's swelled from around about 35 to possibly a few more than 50. Another 9 are rejoining at the back, and it's 50-second spread now from here back to the next main peloton. It's all happened on the Peterberg. We're still bound for the Koppenberg, which is the next big climb with a steepest gradient of 22%. We're turning onto it now, and this is a very select group, and they'll work hard now to break off the rest of this race.
Well, just to tell you about the Koppenberg, it's only 600 meters long, but it's at 22% the maximum gradient, 11.6% is the average, and it is all cobblestones. It's actually been relayed over recent years because it was becoming much too dangerous to use, but it is a phenomenal climb. It's a dangerous climb, and a lot of riders putting very low gears on, 25 tooth sprocket for some of the riders. Tom Bonen is there on the front, followed by Juan Antonio Fletcher. There is Leif Hoste Hincap, he's not far away either.
Stein de Volder, the champion of Belgium. Where else should you be when your country's national champion is right on the front on this most revered climb of the Tour of Flanders? Tom Bonen on the right there is keeping in the saddle. You've got to stay in the saddle. If you get out of the saddle, you lose control of your bike, finish up leaning against the wall, which on this occasion is grass. Looking down the group here now as well, we know Alessandro Ballan, last year's winner, is still up here. Look at the strength of Bonen here. He just uses those shoulders, those huge thigh muscles. He stamps on the pedals. He's too strong for the race right now.
Well, this is a show of defiance. This is me, Tom Bonen, showing you guys how strong I am here this afternoon. This is the only way to ride this climb. There's no easy way. You can't hide back. You can't hold into the main field there. You've got to show how strong you are, and you can only ride up at your maximum speed. There's Sylvain Chavanel a little bit further back. Over on the right-hand side in the green is Thor Hushoff. This, Phil, is a great show of form by Tom Bonen.
But there are still 10 more climbs after this one is over before we get on the road towards the finish in Meerbeeke. Stein de Volder, another good ride from him here. Once a teammate of Tom Bonen. Now he's trying to just keep up with him as the world champion, ex-world champion, albeit, stamps out a superb rhythm. His face here, one of contentment, I think, one of concentration. Look at the face of Stein de Volder. He's grimacing under the pressure.
He has to stay there, though, because he's a teammate of the man who's shown that sign of form there. He's the big teammate of Tom Bonen, followed there by Fletcher. Next along there is Fabien Cancellara, then Philippe Gilbert, then Leif Hoste, then Alessandro Ballan. All of the big names moving to the front.
Little split forming as they come up towards the top of the Koppenberg now. And Quick-Step in the driving seat here. This is Leif a little bit lower down. one or two not pushing with great enthusiasm right now, because this is going back 30 years in the Tour of Flanders. The weather's turned against them, the roads are soaking wet, the back wheels are spinning. It's time to walk.
But look at the difference between this man and the guys we were just looking at. He's climbing here with pure power. Dominance, this looks like to me, from Tom Bonen here this afternoon as he looks over his shoulder just to check and see what sort of damage he's done. But as you said, he knows in the back of his mind, Phil, there are still 10 climbs to go.
And here we go, stop and start at the rear of the field. The Shimano rider there is Kenny van Hummel, who's decided to walk, along with a lot of riders here now. It's about this time of day when they're beginning to wish there must be an easier way of earning a living than being a professional bike rider.
Thomas Vogler is in this group as well, over on the right-hand side in the pale blue jersey of Boyd Telecom. And this really just gives you an indication of what this climb is like. The reason they're having to walk, by the way, is because once you lose traction, you can't actually restart on a road like this, because it's too slippy. It's too steep, too slippy, and impossible to get going again.
And it's always the rider in front whose fault it was. It's never yours, is it?
Oh, it's never your fault. It's always somebody else's. And the tough thing is, you've got to get yourself to the slightly flatter part of the course, get riding again, get your mind back into gear, and realise you've got a long chase to try and get back into this race, because everybody has a teammate in the race and you have a responsibility to your guys in front.
Well, this is now the back end of the field. The chances are the back end of the field will not see the front end anymore today. We're now gone up to the head of the race, the bottom of the wedstrijd, and it looks as though it's thinned down again to a handful of riders here. Well, as we come over the top of the Koppenberg, we've reduced the field yet again. It's going to happen every time we go over a climb, and dare I remind the riders, there are still 10 more climbs to come.
That's the nice thing about you, Phil. You never forget those nice little facts, and I'm sure those guys out there really don't want to know that at all. Well, I'll be a little bit nasty as well, because in another 5 kilometres time, they've got another climb to boot, and again, it's a cobbled climb. It's the climb of Steekbekerrace, a climb of 700 metres, and again, not very steep at 6.7%, but the damage is already starting to be done.
I've only got a handful of maybe a dozen riders here on the split, led by Stein de Volder at the moment. Second wheel there is Tom Bonen. They're doing an awful lot of work to try and shape this race into a small elite group of escapers, and this may be the first nails in the coffin of many riders back there now. You see how narrow the roads are. They aren't wide enough to accommodate a huge peloton. But at this stage of the race, the organisers know that very rarely is a huge peloton. There is the remnants of the riders now as they spread across the fields of Flanders.
Somebody's gone into the field there. He just didn't have the ability to get himself around that corner. This is going to be a phenomenal race. This, I think, is going to go down into the history books as one of the great battles of Flanders, because this is a race which is still looking at around about 70 kilometres to go to the finish, and we're looking already at the heads of state already together in that leading group. There you can just see on the right hand side, he just lost it, and it must have been a little bit muddy going into that field of potatoes.
Well, let's hope he's an ex-cyclo-cross rider, because it's his only chance of coming back here. That must have been very, very unnerving as he did he's come off that bottom bend. These are the riders then. It doesn't look like quite a descent, but it is, and it's a very sharp right-hander, that, and they're all worried about the roads now. And of course the brakes are covered in mud as well as water, and so it is a nasty feeling when you put your brakes on and you go faster rather than stop.
George Hincapie now coming into that leading group of riders. It was down to, I made it around about just 12 riders, but once we've gone off the cobbled climbs, it'll slowly start to come back together. 2 riders will make their way back in, 5, it'll swell up to 30 or 40 riders, but I think we're starting to see a serious decanting going on here. Stefan de Jong there, and I'm surprised to see himself get back up. There is his number 13. He was involved in a nasty crash a little bit earlier on, and I think he will be looking at probably going to an early shower here this afternoon.
He's with the former world champion over 4,000 metres there in the team pursuit, Mark Renshaw, the Aussie, who now rides for Crédit Agricole, and he didn't look as though he's enjoying this at all. I think they'll all be heading for the showers ahead of the riders. The big disadvantage for the men that do well in the Tour of Flanders is they get a cold shower, because all the hot water's gone by the time they get there.
This is the bevoorrading, or the feeding station in Flemish, as that leading group goes through, and you can see the riders now starting to scramble back in. Tom Boonen had also received a little bit of reinforcement there, because Matteo Tossato was one of the riders who came back. So Boonen surrounded already by a number of good, strong men, and that's important, because if you look behind, as we said earlier, Phil, there are no team cars there. There's no technical support.
It is impossible to get through just now. The field is well spread. They're saying there are 30 or so riders here right now in the leading group, but you see they're watching television as well, because they can't get the referees up here yet. They're taking the benefit of the pictures to find out who is in the leading group, because there's no numbers coming at us whatsoever. We're only seeing what we can see, as you can see at home. There's no music at all coming out the radio.
No race support, no race radio. Just a question of survival of the fittest. A man's race, as if we turn the clock back around about 50 years. Philippe Gilbert right in there. There is Fletcher over on the right-hand side, and this is a brief moment to take on board some energy and some liquid to keep the energy levels topped up for what is going to be at least another hour and a half of racing.
Yes, still a very long way to go here. Look at this here now.
Chaos
all
there.
The team cars are blocked.
This is a quick explanation here. What this is in fact, the team cars are not allowed to go over the Koppenberg. So the Koppenberg, in fact, you see a slight deviation there, and these are riders who've actually abandoned the race. They've realized they're not going to get back into the race, but those are the following team cars who were deviated because the Koppenberg is deemed too dangerous to take over all of the team cars.
I can't see why that is.
I've got no idea at all. The reason is, I think, goes back to the time when a man by the name of Jesper Skibby crashed on the Koppenberg, and somebody rode over his bike and he was unable to continue.
Yes, that caused an outcry, of course, and in fact, quite rightly so.
They have a couple of special team pits there, where the teams send their spare wheels and spare bikes to before the race comes through.
Well, the 30 or so riders are being chased by just half a minute now by the next group on the road, so they've got themselves a very workable gap just now. Pressure is on, and it's going to be difficult now for other riders to break in, especially when you've got the strong men here. We're pretty sure De Volder we've seen, Boonen we've seen, Gilbert we've seen, Fletcher is definitely here, George Hincapie we think has made the gap, so a lot of the big names have made the decisive move. They're not going to let this go now.
No, certainly they won't. I think what we'll see over the next few kilometres, we'll see one or two riders starting to get themselves back in here. This is the next little section of cobblestones. In fact, this is Maria Boerstraat. It's a section of cobblestones 2 kilometres in length, and at the end of this, just to make it a little bit more fun for everybody, there's another climb, the Steke Berredries, and that's a climb of 700 metres.
A mere 3 stars, so it's not going to be quite so hard. A chance for these boys to springboard further ahead now, as they feel as though they've started the first big move in the Tour of Flanders. We expected it to happen on the Old Quaremont, it did, and now they've increased on the Koppenberg, and that has caused a huge split in the field.
But I think, Phil, just catching a quick glimpse of the main field, we've got a lot of the big names riding at the front end of it. Sylvain Chavanel has got himself in here for Team Cofidis, and that's nice to see, because he's had a very good start to the season.
Angel Gomez here, number 148, has got himself a problem. Oh, and dear me, that's Johan van Sommen, the strong man. He seems to have been claimed by a flat tyre, I think.
Well, Van Sommer, in the way he stopped there and was looking over his shoulder, it seemed to me that he was actually looking for one of his teammates.
Well, he's left at a very strange time in the race, I would have thought there, because he was on the... Leif Hoster, did he spot him? Not allowed to go back on the course. Hoster is in trouble here as we approach the Steenberg-Dries climb.
That is why Johan van Sommen stopped that quickly. He was looking over his shoulder to see what the problem was, and I couldn't see where the bike was of Leif Hoster. He either crashed or something broke on his machine.
Well, he must have known, but he's not allowed to go backwards down the course, so he's got to wait, and there he is now, just hanging on here. Funnily enough, it's not Hoster who carries the Magic 21 as team leader, it is Johan van Sommen. That was the signal by Angel Gomez as well. He got a problem, and it was Hoster off to the right.
Yeah, he was stopped right in the middle of the road. Now there's going to be a certain amount of chaos there, because the team cars, as you know, can't get past the riders when they block the road like that, so he could lose a little bit of time there, Leif Hoster. He's got to try and remain calm inside himself there and ride himself back into this race, because on a day like today, there's no chance of not having any bad luck. You've just got to ride through it.
Well, that's a real sadness though for Leif Hoster. He really just has this love-hate affair with the Ronde van Vlaanderen. But for the moment, a lot of work still to be done. He's strong, he might get back, but it's going to be a real tough call now because nobody getting there to help him. They're saying the second group is at 35 seconds, so it's still losing a little bit of ground. This is the 700-metre climb for hill number 7 of the Steenbeek Dries. As they go through the S's, there's Angel Gomez. I'm not sure he's not still riding his flat back tyre here.
Well, that might be the thing to do until you've got a team car up behind you. You can see a little bit of work being done by Team Rabobank on the front end of the main field. They're going through now the start of this very difficult climb, the Steenbeek Dries, and that is it. And this is an acceleration coming here now, and it looks as if we've got a small group going off the front, and this is a bit of a move here by Thor Hushovd.
Well, I take my hat off to Thor. He said he was hoping the weather was going to turn bad during the race. Well, it has, because he's got a good chance of defending. He's used to the snow. He used to do a lot of skiing throughout his schoolboy years before he became a cyclist, skiing being, of course, a favourite pastime for the Norwegians. And now he's trying a little move. Good for him. And Sebastian, I've missed his name.
Langeveld.
Thank you very much.
He's a young rider on Team Rabobank, and there's another crash up. These guys are going down.
Oh. Well, we're looking down now at a fallen rider here as they're about to tackle the climb of the Steenbeek Dries. Oh, and that was a very nasty fall indeed. He clipped the right-hand curb there, and he tore his wheel to shreds. And it's a Sony Duval rider. I don't think, but it could have been Angel Gomez, who was sitting at the back of the group, but he's certainly down there, and he looks a little bit stunned.
You know, that's the thing about this race. You have got to be alert. There is no moment of relaxation at all when these riders are riding in a race like this, and he went down so hard he didn't even have time to react.
Well, sadly, it was Angel Gomez who fell. Here's where it happens again. Obviously, he was riding head down. He didn't see that. What a nasty shock that was as well. Ripped his wheel clean out of the frame and smashed it to pieces. He had a mechanical problem and he was waiting for help, but now he needs a complete new bike if he's continuing. Back to the two leaders.
Well, this is, Phil, as we'd said a little earlier, going to be a monumental, legendary day, I feel, here this afternoon.
It is.
You know, there has been so many incidents so far, and we are certainly an awful long way to go to the finish. We're now looking at this very difficult climb here. This is a 15.8% maximum. This is the Tyenberg. It's a 530 meters long, and it's an average grade of 6.6%. But again, this is a very famous climb in the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Sebastian Langeveld, Rabobank, trying to soften the field up, I feel, in favour of Juan Antonio Fletcher. But Langeveld has been at the front all day today, dictating affairs. Let's take a look down in amongst the folks here. The cyclists, the one in the coloured jerseys, by the way, as they get between a huge crowd here on the Steenbeek Dries.
This is actually, we move forward. We went over the Steenbeek Dries pretty rapidly. This, in fact, is the Tyenberg. This is Langeveld on the front. As we look back there, we can see it's all starting to come back together. Langeveld has only got himself about a 10-second advantage over the front end of the main field, who are, I think, giving him a little bit of freedom, but they will accelerate over the top of Tyenberg here. Then they will, fortunately, Phil, have a little bit of respite for about 8 kilometers, because that's the length of time it is before they'll now get to the 10th climb, the Berge te Stene climb, which is a climb of 1.3 kilometers.
So good move then by Sebastian Langeveld. Got off to a good start. He enjoys racing in Belgium. He finished second in Kuurne, Brussels Kuurne, very early on in the year, last month in fact, and now he's up here in the head of the field. It's going to be a long day for these riders, even so. Tyenberg is hill number 9 of 17. Langeveld proving he's pretty strong right now. Turned pro only a couple of years ago. He's only 23 years of age, this guy, and yet he's already won 11 races.
Well, there you go. Langeveld comes round the top of that climb with about a 2-meter advantage over Stijn de Volder. De Volder, the national champion of Belgium, I think this afternoon, will be sacrificing his own chances for Tom Bonen, who we've seen has already, Phil, demonstrated he's in fine form for the Ronde van Vlaanderen here today, looking for win number 3.
Already the World Cup holder has gone. This is Stijn de Volder here now, just trying to bring a little bit of semblance of common sense to this race. There's still a long way to go. Well, the Grand National, the famous horse race in Great Britain, was held yesterday. That's over fence. It's said to be the toughest horse race in the world, and horses are always going down along with the jockeys. I always think of this race as being like the Grand National. If you can stay on your bike and master the conditions, you have a real good chance at winning.
You have to be alert, though. You have to stay near the front, make sure that you avoid any ill luck. We don't know for the moment, because race radio is not telling us what the position in the race is of Leif Hoster. He had a mechanical incident, and I tell you one thing, I think he'll be having a very hard chase to pull himself back into a chance of winning the Ronde van Vlaanderen after 3 second places.
Well, it looks like it's time for a break now, because these riders have all come back together again. Poor old Angel Gomez is lying in the road about 2 kilometres behind them, but the big strong men of this year's Tour de Flanders are still right there on the front. And as you're looking down now on the well, I would say, Paul, it's around still about 30-35 riders. The field, the last time check we got, was around about 50 seconds. Nobody really knows, let's face it. There's no timekeepers between the peloton and the chase, so they're working on landmarks to try and work out the gaps and tell the managers who and what is happening. They have not at any occasion given us a list of riders in this breakaway, so we don't know. In fact, I think George Hincapie is there. But we don't know who is there for CSC, and I think that might be crucial to the plan.
Well, you know, that's what I think I like about races like the Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix, Phil, is the chaos. It's an old-fashioned race. It's a race where you can throw all the technology out of the window. You have to ride like a man. You have to ride with guts and dedication, and you have to really enjoy a bike race like this. That looked like one of the riders from Cofidis at the back there in support of Sylvain Chavanel, but they certainly are not holding back anything here, and somebody's been given the word at the front to keep the hammer down.
Pretty sure that the Cofidis rider there, Paul, is Nick Williams, and looking very useful. He's a man for this sort of a race. But looking here at the front now, Stein de Vol has ridden superbly this week, today rather. He's been second first wheel all the time, trying to keep Tom Boonen away from the front of the action. That's not easy in itself, because Tom, he's still full of enthusiasm. He knows he's hurting the field, but he's got to take into account that they're still here, and there's still a long way to go, and there are still a lot of climbs to come.
Big climbs, nasty climbs that will come down towards the end. Climbs like at the Berendries. For me, the most important thing now will be once we get down towards the end and we go over the Kapelmuur. But I wonder how many men are going to survive the ride down to the Kapelmuur. Team Quickstep have got a lot of riders in this group. Matteo Tossato has made the move. There you've got Stein de Volder. A number of riders in here for Team Rabobank. They're looking after Juan Antonio Fletcher, who's riding there in 4th position. I have seen George Hincapie in this leading group, but again, he's riding very sensibly in about 9th or 10th position, keeping himself away from any danger which may happen at the back of the group.
Just looking there at the group, you know, the French, it's unusual to see French riders in the front group on a course like this. It's not their sort of race at all, but they've got a few of them in here. The last Frenchman of any note to get even a smell at the front was in fact Frédéric Guédon, when he finished 6th in 2003. That's the best place by a Frenchman since that date.
Well, that's never really been a great race for the French, apart from a young man by the name of Jackie Durand, who won this race a few years ago with a rather strange and interesting breakaway. That doesn't happen very often. In fact, Jackie Durand not too far away from us here, commentating for one of the French-speaking television channels.
Well, in 92 Ronde van Vlaanderen, French riders only won on 3 occasions, so any Frenchman will be remembered.
He certainly will be remembered. I have a feeling, though, that Sylvain Chavanel may well come in with a good performance here, because he seems to have reached a certain amount of maturity. See how dangerous it was getting around that corner. There's no such thing as a level playing field here in Belgium. You've got to jump over everything.
The CSC rider, in fact, punctured there. I still can't see his face as we go past so quickly. But there's a wheel required, and what he did there, Paul, on that right-hand bend, he clipped the corner, and he just got a snake bite on his tyre.
And that's exactly what happened, and they were calling for the neutral service vehicle to come up alongside him, and the reason for that is there are no team cars yet behind there. You can see the little bit of panic there, and he's going to have to wait an awful long time. And the bad thing is he won't actually have one of his own team wheels in there, and that's always bad for the morale.
Well, and the trouble is he was right with the leading group, and the poor old Shimano Spurs man there is working overtime. He's on a motorbike, but you know, there's only so many wheels you can carry, of course. So first to puncture will get them. This field now, again, just trying to settle down. They're not so much worried about who is behind. They're not going to try and race them away and keep them pinned back. They'll just keep their tempo and think for themselves up front. If you get back, you get back. That's the look of the draw.
Well, I think that CSC rider may well be having a hard time getting himself a wheel, because Race Radio is still shouting for the neutral service vehicle to come up and assist that rider who had a flat tyre. This is the second group on the road, the Tweede Achtervolgers, the second chasing group, and they are currently at around about 40 seconds.
And having told you all morning about the wonderful weather conditions at the finishing line, we're now in the process of having a little bit of a sleet storm. So it's now caught up with us, and it's still with the riders out on course. They zigzag around the Flanders hillsides and never all that far away as the crow flies from where we're sat. But the fact that the Silence Lotto team are driving that group, it looks as though Leif Hoster's got himself into this second group.
Well, he must have waited a long time to get himself a change. You can see this is the front group we're looking at now. They're slowing around, waiting for the next moments to start accelerating, and these little decelerations could in fact play into the hands of Leif Hoster, who had, of course, we saw there the big strong man Johan van Summeren with him.
It sounded like they've just said, they're speaking in Flemish on the race radio, that the gap is now 30 seconds from the chase group. So they are getting close, and Webb might have got up to the riders up here.
I don't think they'll worry about taking advantage of the mishap of Leif Hoster. They're actually riding their own race here and getting on with it. They've just gone over the cobblestones of the Etikhoven plain before they get themselves ready for the next climb of the day, which is going to be a nice asphalt climb, the climb of Bergen to Stene, a climb of around about 1.3 kilometers.
Next up is hill number 10 now, the Berg to Stene. And that's going to give us only a short gradient of around 10%. So it's not a huge challenge. They've only given it a 2-star rating. And the steep bit is more or less at the bottom of the climb.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of respite for a while for the riders over the nasty climbs as they start to figure out what the tactics are going to be for the last 40 kilometers. We're now looking at around about 55 kilometers to go. And Johan van Summeren, we've seen him do this so many times in the past. Phil. Oscar Freire now looking for the move. You can only just pick it out because he's got his World Championship bands on. None of these riders in these weather conditions are hardly recognizable.
Well, I really didn't think this was a big race for Freire. But there we are, former world champion on the front.
And normally, reputedly, the rider who waits for the sprint because he's got a phenomenal burst of acceleration. But here he knows that we're in a critical part of the race here. Riders are starting to calculate and thinking about the Berendries or the Muur de Grammont, the Bosberg. And he says, well, I'm going to have a go at this here and see if I can drag a small group of 4 or 5 riders clear.
Well, Freire, for me, is doing this to force the others to chase him because they are always thinking of their leader, which is Juan Antonio Fletcher. Now, they've just told us the gap is 30 seconds to the chase group. It looks a little bit closer than that. It looks to be around about 20, maybe.
Yes, you could just see at the end of that long road there was the group containing Leif Hoster. He's battling to try and get himself back into the race. This is Frédéric Guédon in the white jersey on the left-hand side. He's a former winner, of course, of the great Paris-Roubaix Classic, and he is looking after, I think today, the chances of Philippe Gilbert. But this is a great move by number 31, Oscar Freire.
Well, Oscar Freire didn't speak any English whatsoever when he won his first world title, when we all never heard of him. That was one of the first races he ever won, in fact, was the World Championship. Now speaks it well. Look at the bridge.
Coming across there to this small group. He's noticed a small group moving across the front and thought that this is the possibility of a dangerous move. But he's very rapidly there brought back into the fold. You can see the second group on the road there is a group of Leif Hoster, and there's a split in that group there of Tom Bonen, and it may well be that this race is going to split apart again.
Well, we're being treated to a vintage edition of the Tour de Flanders, with no doubt about that now. The rain has gone off again at the finishing line and the sun has come out over the riders. So you know how unpredictable the weather is today. But look at this now, Big George with his white jersey. Yes, it was white on one occasion for Team High Road on the front. Now just getting the mud off his glasses there and checking out. I don't think he wanted Leif Hoster and the boys to get back in that second group, and he started a nice move here.
Well, Incapi very attentive. He saw the fact that there was a nice little split, so just accelerated across there. Stijn de Volder is sitting at the back of this group. He won't do anything at all, and almost running out of road there, Oscar Freire, as we come into this next little town, the town of Markerkerken. Very much in the heart of Flanders here this afternoon. The main field nice and safely around that corner, but you just see how dangerous any corner can be in the Tour of Flanders. You come around on a nice asphalt road, and all of a sudden it's broken up with a little bit of cobblestones on the side. Hincapie here accelerating away. He sees this as a nice move.
He's been such a master of these events at this time of the year. He just loves racing in Belgium. Look at his pure strength here. And a man of strength goes places in these classes. They're tough men events. Oscar Freire equally finding his form. It's been coming steadily all year. Bit of a tight old turn, and the wet roads don't help either. A little bit nervous there, Oscar, but at least he's round safely.
Well, I think that's an indication of just how many risks he's taking going around these corners. He's certainly put the cat amongst the pigeons here, Phil, and created a split at the front end of the main field. There's the group going away behind him. In fact, they've got themselves a nice little advantage there. George Hincapie is in that first splinter group, and Tom Bonen is in the second one.
Well, there's only 17 riders in this chase. It looks as though we've got 6 or 7 in the next group, so we're a group of about 25, 26 men here. They know there is a chase group containing Leif Hoster at 30 seconds, and it's beginning to look as though that's never 30 seconds, is it?
That's not 30 seconds, but it's proving to be a massive battle for Leif Hoster to get himself back into this bike race. It's going to be a tale this evening, Phil, of the chase of 2 champions, because Leif Hoster is trying to get himself back into this race. He obviously didn't panic at all with that mechanical incident, but it must have really scared him a fraction.
Well, that was a wise move, I think, and he's going to try and come back. Just giving a few seconds lead for Oscar Freire, but we can see that at the moment. Steindevold is trying to get up to the Liquigas rider here.
Well, the accelerations and decelerations all the time. Look at the power of Leif Hoster, the champion of Belgium there, just riding across the gap. He won't go to the front and work at all, because he's thinking about one thing this afternoon. He's thinking about Tom Bonen and Bonen's possible ride into the history books. Now, this is the next climb of the day, and this is the climb of Berchtesgaden at 1,300 meters. It's an asphalt climb, 10.7% at its maximum for an average of 5%. Not too much to worry about, but again, the acceleration's coming.
A little bit of reforming here at the moment. Steindevold knows he's got a real race trying to control these leaders now. He's thinking only of his team leader, Tom Bonen. See by the flags that this is Balan. Well, I didn't recognise him, I must confess, but if this is Balan, they should be starting to wonder and counter this move. It is Alessandro Balan, and it looks poor by his knee, as though he's been on the floor today.
He has been on the floor. You can see his shorts are ripped as well, and he's seen that as a nice little move to try and ride away from the front end of the peloton.
I have to say that Balan just loves, and it's very unusual to refer to the Italians loving this part of the world, Flanders, but they do. And it is a very, very difficult part of the race. It's a good time to make a move, but he's just casually riding along here, just reminding them perhaps he's in the front group, and now letting them catch up again.
Well, they've pulled themselves all back together. Nice to see the yellow flags of the Lion of Flanders out there celebrating what really is a true Flemish Ronde van Vlaanderen here this afternoon. The group is starting to swell again, just a fraction, as you can see everybody paying a serious amount of attention. It was nice to see how good George Hincapie was, but this man could be creating a rather fabulous surprise here this afternoon, because Oscar Freire is a 3-time former champion of the world, but never has he really performed well here at the Tour of Flanders.
But I'm convinced this is a ploy. He's doing this to try and draw the sting in favour of Juan Antonio Fletcher. I think that's his thoughts here. And Rabobank have had a number of riders do this today, except we're running out of strong men from the team right now. And Lamprey have got 1 or 2 riders up here for Balan.
Looking back, there's actually a number of riders from Team Astana in this group as well, and it looks now as if the referees are pulling the cars out of the gap and the neutral service vehicle, and that's an indication that this next group on the road is about to make the junction, and that will pull Leif Hoster back into the race.
And that's a professional for you. He didn't panic, he relied heavily, and hats off to Johan van Summeren, who knew what had happened and waited on the road and did a lot of work to bridge the gap again. He's worth his weight in gold, Johan van Summeren. He's such a worker. We've seen him do it. He's ridden the Tour de France 3 times. He's finished all 3, but that wasn't the name of the game. It was to make sure people like Cadel Evans and Robbie McEwen were always in the right place to win their respective leaders' jerseys.
We're looking for a very nice gap here for Oscar Freire of around about 20 seconds, but I think at this moment in the race, Phil, with that group coming back from behind with Leif Hoster, they'll get themselves organised and then start to chase a little bit later on once we start to get into the strategic second zone of big mountains. 27 seconds actually is the official time check.
As I say, I'm not sure where they're getting the timings from right now. It appears a little bit closer than that for us, as the riders now continue to step on the gas here. This quick step rider at the front now, I think it's Wilfred Kretskins, I might be wrong, who sits on the front setting the pace, as we've now got Bonen moved up into third wheel, sharp left-hander. Motorbikes need to accelerate just a little bit, get out of the way. That's nice peloton.
Well, in fact, Leif Hoster's group hasn't yet quite made the contact. There they are, just
and I
coming
think
around.
That 27 seconds was not quite right, because that bunch is going to be on this time.
Well, they're accelerating, and it's a rather large bunch there, but I think the most important member of that bunch is going to be Leif Hoster.
Yep.
We're now going to look, Phil, at around about 60 to 70 riders coming together, and that will give the advantage to Oscar Freire.
The wind coming from the top left corner of your picture right now, forming that echelon as the riders fan across to the left of the road. One or two strong men want to get the pain over quickly and rejoin the leaders, because they're ever so close, but then if the leaders shut off on the chase, the gap opens again, and the anxious ones won't want that to happen. Hoster wants to get in there and settle down, get up alongside Tom Bonen and the likes of Oscar Freire and say, I'm back, boys.
Just see the hard job it is for the guys who actually service these riders technically. That car trying to get itself past there is the neutral service vehicle. Now, the job of the neutral service vehicle is to ride in front of the race, then drop behind the breakaways as they form. But unfortunately here in a race like the Ronde van Vlaanderen, the roads are so narrow, it's very difficult sometimes for the neutral service vehicle to move forward at a time like this.
Well, still Freire is up the road, and still this big group, they haven't quite closed. You see, it did open again. They've not quite got it shut down yet. There is the leader, Oscar Freire. He's got a gap of about 40 seconds. It's been hard work, but he's prized it open. We're into Bovenstraat now, another nasty stretch of cobbles. We are looking now at Oscar Freire here, and as I say, he's on Haaghoek, which is 2 kilometres of cobblestones. He's about 40 seconds ahead of a field, which is more or less together now with Leif Hoster, but they haven't quite bridged the gap just yet.
Well, as they say now, look at the move here now. There's a nice little bunny hop there.
Lovely.
The problem is there was a little dent in the cobblestones there. This starts off as the Bovenstraat and moves into the Haaghoek, and this is a 2 kilometre section of cobblestones. Team Quickstep have got a lot of riders in this group, which is now all of a sudden just swelled to around about 70 riders in strength. The next climb of the day that we will be looking at will be, again, one of the famous climbs. There are two climbs come close together very shortly. The climb of the Leeberg, which is a 13% climb, followed very rapidly by the Berendries, where in the past we've seen riders make the move for victory. At the moment, one rider has made the very tactical move of moving clear of the front end of the main field, and that is the world champion, Oscar Freire.
Freire, I think, trying desperately to draw the sting of the chasers, which he's doing here for sure, in favour of Juan Antonio Fletcher, who's in this group. Gert Stegmans is doing a lot of work up here for Quickstep, as too is Stein de Volder. Bonen is absolutely brilliant today, and so far has not been under any pressure whatsoever in holding a front place in the peloton. There is a bridge, you know, Paul, that bridge hasn't come about yet. There's still riders chasing here, and there they are, and that contains Leif Hoster, who had the bad luck to puncture, the common sense not to kill himself. He's coming back in a group of around about 45-50 riders.
He mustn't panic at all if he wants to pull himself back into this race and win the Ronde van Vlaanderen. I might just have called Oscar Freire the world champion. I should have said the three-time former world champion, and here he is, riding over the cobblestones like a true Trojan. He is, again, like his teammate Juan Antonio Fletcher, one of the rare Spaniards who excel in these very tough northern roads. He's got himself, Phil, around about a 30-second advantage. He's looking over to see where is the rest of this bike race.
Well, when Oscar Freire finished second in the World Under-23 road race title in 1997, I don't think I even turned the page of the book. I just didn't see it. But when he popped into the World Road Race Champion in 1999 as a pro, we still didn't know him, and he won the title. Then we knew him, and he's won that title 3 times now.
Well, he's about to get pulled up there by the front end of the main field, and I think the important thing to remember about his first world title, Phil, was in fact that year he'd been dogged by injury through the whole of the season.
Yeah.
And going into the world title, he only had 14 days of competition. And that's why nobody really knew who he was, but we've certainly learned that name ever since.
No, he's a fantastic bike rider, very strong, very talented. His career's been dogged a little bit by injuries. and he's had various operations, especially on his seat. But I must say that when he does ride and he is in form, he's a terrific natural talent.
I love the way you mentioned that, the injury to his seat
well,
area.
I couldn't think of a better way to put it.
Well, the French are very nice when they talk about it. They call it the entrejambe. Between the legs.
Between the legs. I thought it was the opposite to the legs.
No,
well, there he is,
go.
cool as you like. He's made his effort. His mate's tucked down there. You can see him. Juan Antonio Flair. So this is the catch here of Oscar Freire. He's been away for about 10 kilometres, a maximum lead of 40 seconds. He's put back into the head of the peloton, which currently is about 25 riders strong, with a group of 50, including Leif Hoster, trying to bridge the gap. They were almost on 2 kilometres ago, and it's gone out to about 15 seconds again.
Well, they haven't yet been able to make the junction because of the repetitive nature of all of these climbs. We're now here comfortably on the Leiberg, 950 metres, 13.8% at the maximum for an average of 4.2%. And still, Stijn de Volder was a man who last year was one of the stalwarts of Team Discovery Channel, snapped up immediately by Team Quickstep, and he's actually riding away from the field here.
Well, I have to say he's riding superbly, Stijn de Volder, and continuing to push the pace. He's been at the front almost every time. He's throwing all his energy to the wind, and it's in favour, I'm sure, of his team leader, Tom Bonen.
Frédéric Guédon is the rider coming. No, it's not. In fact, it's Philippe Gilbert has seen this as a serious gap, and he realises that was a nice tactical move by Tom Bonen there. Let the gap go and let everybody else come up with the pace making. Look at the face here of second place rider Philippe Gilbert, and I think you can see just how difficult so far the race has been. We're looking at the top of this climb at 48 kilometres to go. That's still 30 miles of racing for De Volder and Philippe Gilbert.
He won this year, by the way, the overall classification in a much sunnier race on much better roads, the Tour de Algarve in Portugal. And he ran out that by virtue of his brilliant ability to ride a time trial, because he won the Stage 4 time trial. There's the gap coming together again. You could have been forgiven for a moment seeing that camera shot there, that we weren't commentating on Paris-Roubaix, but we're not. We're on the Tour of Flanders.
And the man chasing there at the front of that third group on the road was Leif Hoster in person, realising now that he'd used up all of his teammates and the pressure was coming down to it, and he was having to take the responsibility of bridging that last 10 or 15 seconds on his own. Gilbert now riding now finally, Phil, with a lot of maturity. The first time I ever saw him was way down in South Australia in what was then the Jacobs Creek Tour Down Under. He climbed up to get himself a stage victory ahead of his teammate Baden Cook. But I think in this last 12 months, he really has matured into a top-class rider.
But just watching, there's 3 good riders getting clear there at the moment, and Frédéric Guédon, the last Frenchman to pierce the top 6, and he did that in 2003. No Frenchman's been there since, so it looks as though he's finding his legs. He won Paris Tours a year or so ago, and he pops up and lands the big ones and then disappears for a while, but he's very, very experienced. Wants to get on with the job. Sebastian Langeveld just saying to Stijn de Volder, I'm not helping you. Please go up and join the leader.
Well, Langeveld making the contact again. Another group coming across there. Philippe Gilbert has nicely slipped into that leading group of 3. This is George Hincapie in the second group. And just trying to see who the CSC rider was who's made the junction as well. They're trying to ride across to the leading group of 3. This is going to be an incredible race here this afternoon, because there's no domination just yet, and Tom Bonen has taken the back seat, I think, to rest up and allow other people to start chasing to save himself for what would probably be a big move on the Mur de Grammont.
It might be a clever tactic, because with Stijn de Volder up there, why should Tom chase it down? Because Stijn looks as though he's quite capable at the moment of looking after himself. We'll see how it works out, but we're going to have 6 leaders here very, very shortly. This is Sebastian Langeveld at the back.
Well, he's come to the back because he's just heard all of a sudden that the man coming across there from Team Rabobank is his teammate Juan Antonio Fletcher. So Fletcher and George Hincapie are now riding across the gap, trying to make it a 6-man leading group.
Now that, I think, would spell trouble for Bonen. He's not going to sit back and watch this one move too much, I don't think. He'll have big respect for both Hincapie and Fletcher. So very shortly we are going to have 6 riders in the lead here in the Tour of Flanders, and we've still got 6 more climbs to come. These 3 riders, with Carsten Kroon it is, not Fletcher, Paul, who is getting on terms with the leader.
Carsten Kroon, the rider in there for Team CSC. A little panic now starting to come on board here. We're looking now at the formation of this leading group.
Karsten Kroon, the rider for Team CSC, Juan Antonio Fletcher in the orange at the back. And now this has been a very nice tactical move here for Team Rabobank, because they've got 2 riders in this group. They've got Langeveld and Fletcher.
6 riders are together. Frederik Guedon, Stein de Volder, Sebastian Langeveld, Juan Antonio Fletcher, George Hincapie, Karsten Kroon. And Stein de Volder is now assessing whether he's going to drive this or wait. And it wouldn't surprise me, Paul, if he stops and shuts down.
He's decided to wait, but there's another rider coming across the gap there, sort of disguised by their motorbikes, who are halfway across the gap. And in fact, there's more than one rider. There are 3 riders making the move across the gap. That's going to make 9 riders. I think that will spell the end, Phil, for this leading group. The rider in there is Nick Noyens there, number 65. And just sitting on the back, a rider from Lamprey, I don't know very much at all about, that is Simon Spilak.
Spilak joins the leaders here, a new professional, actually turned pro this year, if memory serves me right. And we're looking now at the leaders here. They are forming 9 riders at the front. Frederik Guedon, Stein de Volder, Langeveld, Fletcher, Hincapie and Karsten Kroon. And Stein de Volder looking a little bit concerned that one Tom Bonen has not joined the leaders yet. Nick Noyens and Simon Spilak also coming up here.
Well, I think now the attitude of Stein de Volder will change. He'll move to the back of this group and he'll wait to see whether there's going to be a return by his team leader for the day, Tom Bonen. Bonen there sitting in 2nd place. You can see we're now on the next climb of the day, and this is the climb of the Berendries. And there's the move by Tom Bonen. He doesn't want anybody going clear. Immediately chased there, Phil, by Fabian Cancellara of Team CSC.
It had to be here. He's waiting for the road to go up to try and bridge the gap. It's going to all be shut down with another show of absolute powerhouse riding by the former world champion Tom Bonen. Steepest part of this course is 12.3%. It's not an absolute backbreaker, 3 stars, but look at the strength of Bonen.
But what it indicates is there are a lot of riders who are very tired in this group because nobody's responded. When you see Tom Bonen get out of the saddle, you have to respond if you've got anything. The only men capable of responding were Alessandro Balan there just behind him, and Cancellara looks to me as if he may be cracking.
Well, this is another crucial moment in the race here as they now try to bridge the gap. If they can get 12 riders cleared, it might well be the beginning of the end for the rest of the race. Still working at the front here, the leader of the race, which is Langeveld, trying to once again to split up this race.
Well, Langeveld working for the rest of the team, but I tell you one thing, Fabian Cancellara was put into a little bit of difficulty there. He was unable to follow that acceleration. Just a little bit further up, you can see Tom Bonen, and he has now, just as we go over the top of the Berendries, joined the leading group. However, Fabian Cancellara had a little bit of difficulty there, but he should, Phil, recover over the top to join in a couple of minutes' time.
The Astana rider, by the way, who's gone across with him is Gregory Last. He's now joined the front runners as well. And this is developing, and it's not good enough, in fact, for Sebastian Langeveld, because he's going again and he's causing them all the time to chase. Throughout the race today, Stein de Volder has been working for Tom Bonen, but it's been the Rabobank boys who have caused the reactions behind.
They're trying to wear down Team Quickstep. They're trying to isolate Tom Bonen if they can, and this young man, Langeveld, has been absolutely phenomenal. He's not thinking about himself, as was Oscar Freire earlier on. They are thinking today that their man, Juan Antonio Fletcher, has got the legs to win the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and what a story that would be.
Well, it certainly would. He'd become one of only 5 riders to have done it 3 times if he gets across the line. But looking over here now, we have got a nice little group of 9 or 10 riders here. Now they've got to pay a lot of attention because these boys are all formed on their pure strength. Not been a lucky breakaway, slipping away out of sight of the riders. Pure strength has got them to where they are. It could well be the beginning of the end for the rest of the riders here.
Absolutely.
Except one.
It's very difficult, this race right now, but I think the way Tom Bonen rode away from everybody there on the Langeveld, not the Berendries, it was an indication it is Pozzato trying to come across the gap. They've seen the importance. When you see Tom Bonen ride away, when you see Fabian Cancellara, you know this is the move. Everybody else is tired in this race. You've got to go and do it on your own now.
Oh, and the other rider stopped on the right there was the other Liqui Gas rider who was in the break, and he's dropped behind at the moment. So that'll be Spilak, I think, who's just fallen out of the action, but he's seen his team captain go forward, so that can't be all bad news at the minute.
Well, in fact, I think what happened there was he had a problem going around the corner.
So are we seeing now the beginning of the end for the rest of the riders in what is an extraordinary Tour de Flanders? This man is causing pain to everybody, and Sebastian Langeveld is trying to go clear again.
Very shortly they will come into the small town of Nederbrakel, and that will lead them down to the climb of the Valkenberg, which is the 13th climb of the day. But I think what's more important, Phil, is what's starting to loom on the horizon is the climb of Ten Bosch, and then of course the famous climb of the Mur de Grammont. There now is Fabian Cancellara. On his shoulder is Juan Antonio Fletcher, but this really is starting to turn out into the heads of state, this leading group, and we may well have finally seen the first big selection.
And I don't know if you noticed that, Paul, but Philippe Gilbert is here as well right now, has also joined the leaders. So Stein de Volder is up, and ahead of him is Langeveld. Surely there's nobody else going to get across. The big boys who had the strength realised this was the big move.
Carsten Kroon now is the man starting to come across the gap here. He's seen the dangerous move now. Once you get so many big heads of state, it's a slight chance for the lieutenants to take advantage, and that is what is happening here, because somebody before the start today said to me, you know, Fabian Cancellara is going to be such a marked man that you better watch out for Carsten Kroon, because he may well take advantage with his tactical knowledge of the fact that his team captain is well marked.
Well, there's been no respite whatsoever. We race back under beneath the sun again as the riders get onto drier roads, and look at this man turn the gas on.
Fourth man to come across, though, is George Hincapie, using all of his tactical knowledge here this afternoon. He's looking for these moves, he's riding sensibly. Once he sees the split coming, he allows it to develop slightly, and he accelerates across, but somebody else has seen the move too, because there's man number 5.
But Sebastian Langeveld, at 23 years of age, is hurting some of the most famous names in world cycling just now as they continue to try, and now Balan has come over as well. So the big names are coming back into the frame one by one, but every time they think they've made the decisive move, it splits again, and there's big gaps this time.
This is a good gap, and I'm surprised that Tom Boonen is not moving across these gaps. He's being caught out every time. He's the man who's shown the most power on the climbs, and that maybe is a big mistake. He's shown everybody just how good he is. Nick Nguyen's now on the front there, and Tom Boonen getting rid of his extra shirt there, getting himself ready to start racing. There's Philippe Gilbert in the white jersey, Juan Antonio Fletcher in the orange. They're going to have to organise themselves, Phil, because that is, I think, looking like a very interesting 5-man group.
Now, will the shadow back boxing start, whereby they all look at each other and say, but it's your turn? No, it's not, it's your turn. The arguments start and the gap opens up. George Hincapie's been riding very sharp today, been really riding with superb attentions. That's Carsten Kroon, the CSC rider, who's got across to the leader here, just sitting at the back. Very workmanlike group. This is going to put Stein de Volder in a difficult situation here. He's got to decide now, should he work on with these strong riders, or should he try and annoy them, sit at the back and wait for the arrival of Tom Boonen? He'll have to make that decision shortly.
Well, this is the next group on the road. In fact, this was the group, I think, was the group that contained Leif Hoster, and they've just pulled themselves back in. Now, that is actually going to be good for the leading group of 5 riders, because there will be a serious slowing down, and that's exactly what's happening in front of our eyes.
Yeah, because now these boys have just had all of that hard work, finally got back to this group, are going to find there's a breakaway of 5 riders now gone clear. And there they are for you. Balan was the last to reach them. There he is up there near the front now. Last year's winner then, Alessandro Balan, proudly wearing number 1 here as we head now to the Valkenberg.
Well, here we are. We're on the Valkenberg, 12.8%, just a 540-metre climb.
We join the lower slopes of climb number 13 here, the Valkenberg, a mere 2 stars, but significantly, Stein de Volder has decided to try and go it alone. This breakaway has got quite a little lead now, as behind the field, including Leif Hoster, has regrouped. George Hincapie is in the breakaway, as too is Langeveld. Alessandro Balan, the last to join them, last year's winner. A very, very select front group of 5 or 6 riders.
Well, in fact, the front end of the main field there just briefly being led by Rick Verbrugge. Now, he must certainly be working for Sylvain Chavanel, the Frenchman who is on form for Team Cofidis. This is Langeveld, followed by de Volder. Hincapie, I have to say, is riding a very good tactical race here this afternoon, and he's indicated as well that he's got the form to win this bike race.
He certainly has. The way he's ridden today, George Hincapie flying the flag for his new team. He's watched every move. I can't believe that Stein de Volder can ride like this all the way to the finish. He's been leading up every climb today, doing work we thought Tom Bonen. Inexplicably at the moment, Bonen's allowed some of the most dangerous riders in the race to go clear, and the group is not coming back as we pull back down the climb here to the start of the climb of the Valkenburg. There they are, look, and the reaction is not there. Nick Noyens on the front, and just no real chase here. Pizzato joined this group, hasn't gone forward. I think he has gone forward.
He has gone forward. We're at the finish line here, looking down on a damp road, although the rain has in fact disappeared and the clouds are starting to raise a bit. But these guys have been through all kinds of weather conditions here this afternoon. I think Tom Bonen may well be playing a very clever tactical game, because that leading group has just got about a 22-second advantage, and it puts pressure on a lot of the other teams to actually chase them down. Pizzato is in this second group on the road here this afternoon, as is Fletcher there in about 5th position, and Bonen has the advantage, Phil, of at least having Stein de Volder in that leading group of 5.
Well, that's a good point, but has he got the legs to take it through to the finish? Hincapie's rode a very clever race today. He's just been watching all the moves. Here we're looking at Stein de Volder, number 27 at the back here. And his teammate here having a chat there. Sorry, Leif Hoster, sorry, at the back, number 27. And wrong champion there, as we're now looking also at Martin Jelingi, who's a very good, strong rider himself. He's transferred to Silence Lotto this year and will prove a great teammate. But he's riding alongside Leif Host, and Leif Host not looking too happy with the way this race is shaping just now.
Well, he's had a long, hard chase, Leif Hoster, to get himself back into the race. He's got to try and recover and get some food down his neck over the next couple of kilometres, because we've still got some really serious climbs to go. They have gone over the top of the Valkenburg, and very shortly, and I'm working out at around about 6 kilometres, they got the famous climb of Ten Bos, followed by the Eikemolen, the Elke Windmill climb. Hincapie riding sensibly. There he is at the front there in his white jersey of Team High Road, a new team structure for him for the first time really in his career, while there are still incidents and accidents happening at the back end of the main field, and that rider from Team Middelram was Nicky Terpstra, having a slight mechanical incident.
Well, those 5 boys up front could well have shaped this race for themselves here. It's now all down for them. Langeveld is the rider who did it. There's the balancing act of Nicky Terpstra, trying to get a quick stop. He's looking for a wheel. I think it's a back one. Meanwhile, Liquigas, because they've realised in fact Pizzato's been dropped by that leading group, have now had to take up the chase. Langeveld, Hincapie, de Volder, Gruen and Balan, they're driving this race towards its conclusion. And now looking for the 10 boss, a mere 1 star out of 5, and that's hill number 14.
Well, I tell you why I think this is in fact tactically swinging to the advantage of Tom Bonen, because he's forcing other teams to come to the front. The fact that he's got the Belgian national champion in that group, Stein de Volder, means that all of the other teams, of course, like Pepo Pozzato's team, have got to come and do the work, and it takes pressure off Quickstep and Bonen. I think Bonen is thinking more about the Muur de Grammont, and he would like to see this race come back together just before Gerardsbergen.
Well, if you're in any doubt of which way to go in the Tour of Flanders, you just follow the left-hand turn, lined by the people here. 5 riders speed towards the 14th climb of the day, which is 10 Boss, and in the front group is the American George Hincapie.
Well, there is Balan on the front there in the pink and blue jersey of Team Lampre, and it's pretty impressive, Phil, to see him in this leading group, because he's been down and on the ground. You can see his shorts are ripped and he's actually got blood coming from his knee, followed there by the young rider Langeveld, who last year was the winner of the Electra Tour in Holland. There's the average speed as they go slightly downhill, almost 70 kilometres an hour, not far off 44 miles an hour. Sitting on the back, Stein de Volder, I think now will become the anchor of this leading group of 5. He won't do anything at all to encourage the success of the breakaway. And the big man from the United States in the middle there, High Road written on his shorts, George Hincapie.
So around about 229 kilometres covered now, and a little bit of help required here. Langeveld requesting his team car. It's either for a drink. I don't think he's got a flat tire. He's pushing on. Stein de Volder looking around. He's probably seen his hand go up.
I think it's getting to the point now where these riders are looking for technical information. They're all a little bit worried on exactly what is happening behind, because Langeveld, a young rider, a developing rider, only in his second real season as a professional bike rider, is wondering what's happening with his men behind, because he's got Oscar Freire behind. He was actually just looking for a drink, and the drinks can be handed up until 20 kilometres to go
by the neutral service vehicle. De Volder there, the champion of Belgium, formerly got used to seeing him in the dark blue jersey of Team Discovery Channel, has now switched across to Team Quickstep, and of course he is the national champion. And what a glory for him, being the national champion, riding at the front in what is Belgium's biggest bike race.
It is, and Karsten Kroon in the move, finishing 4th in this race last year, and now looking for a podium position. He's read it right, he's in the break, he's on form, had a win on the second day of the Castilla y León, a Spanish race. And you know, time's running out for him as well now. He's 32 years of age, Karsten Kroon. He's had a 4th and an 8th in this event over the years, and we're looking back at the field now, not surprisingly, being led by the Cofidis boys. They'll need to be helped out by the Liquigas riders, and Tom Bonen is going to wait and gamble and see if Stein de Volder is going forward to the victory, or whether he might have to try and come away from the last couple of climbs of the day on a counter-attack.
Well, this is the small town of Brakel here, and if you've ever been to Belgium, it's a very important town. It's at the centre of almost every bike race, and this is the star of the Tour of Flanders, a little piece of architecture put out there to celebrate the fact that the Tour of Flanders and almost every other bike race, Phil, comes through the town of Brakel.
Home of Robbie McEwen and home of Peter van Petegem. Peter van Petegem now retired. As we look now at the head here, this is the chasing group in the Tour of Flanders here, led by Liquigas and Cofidis, because the others, especially Team High Road, have got riders up front. We're heading towards the next climb number 14 of 17 at Ten Bosch. And these are the leaders here. Sebastian Langeveld on the front for Rabobank. George Hincapie of Team High Road. Stein de Volder. There's the gap, so the chase is still on, and it's actually quite violent right now. Also Karsten Kroon and the last year's winner, Alessandro Ballan. It's not sure it's going to work though, Paul, because that work is being done pretty strained by the boys from Liquigas and Cofidis.
I don't think it is going to work, because it's stretched up to around about the 22-second advantage, and now, just looking from the helicopter a few moments ago, I guesstimated that we were looking at probably 10 seconds advantage, and there was a serious chase organised in the front end of the main field. Not just one team, but several teams prepared to do the work on the front end of the main field. We'll shortly turn now into the Ten Bosch climb, and that is a very difficult climb, the summit of which is only 31 kilometres to go. That's 18 miles of racing down to the finish, and I have a feeling that on the slopes of Ten Bosch we may well see the return of the big names into this bike race.
13 seconds, unlucky for some, maybe, and they're all looking over the shoulder here. It's saying goodbye to Robbie McEwen's hometown of Brakel as the riders move away here. And it looks a little bit more than 13 seconds, but not much more, as here come the cavalry around the corner. And they, of course, can now see, as the sun starts to pop out again behind the fluffy white clouds, they will see the leaders up ahead. I thought that was a great move. I think they're a little bit unlucky, Paul. The distance between the Valkenburg and the Ten Bosch has proved just a little bit too far.
Well, you have to judge everything to perfection in a bike race like this, and I wonder if Tom Bonen has pulled a clever tactical move there of slipping back and allowing everybody else to start to panic a bit. You've got George Hincapie in the front. We've also got our man there, Stein de Volder. We've got Alessandro Ballan. So you guys, you get on with it and you chase, and I'll take a little bit of a breather for 10 or 15 kilometres, and I'll come back and I'll whack you on the Mur de Grammont.
But also the other clever team here today, for my money, is Rabobank. They've used every rider except the favourite on the team, which is Fletcher, and he's still up there in the group. Let's not forget either, Leif Host has come back into the action. A very long chase, although he himself didn't use his energy up chasing. He relied on the peloton to do it for him. But he's back in the race here now, and I don't think it'll be long before he gets up towards the front again.
This is the climb now of Ten Bosch, 450 metres, not very much, but don't forget these guys have been riding in the saddle now for 233 kilometres. It's 9% in its steepest pointer, and 7% is the average. I have a feeling, though, that George Hincapie, Phil, has ridden a very sensible race, and even if there is another move that goes on the day, Hincapie's got the legs to go with a second move if these 5 riders get caught.
Well, he's long enough in the tooth, he's experienced to know if you get caught, you try again. Not every move works first time, as long as he hasn't committed too much energy, and in fairness, he hasn't. He's done nothing more than just a little bit of a share of the work. He's waiting to see what develops before he shows his true strength. The man who's been absolutely brilliant so far is on the front now, Sebastian Langeveld. 22 and not 23 until December this year. He's a super talent for the future.
Yes, only his second year as a professional bike rider. There's the summit there of the big climb of Ten Bosch, and there is the main field. We're looking probably at a 10 to 15 second advantage. I think what will write the end of the breakaway success is the combination of these two teams, Team Liquigas on the front and Team Cofidis, we've just seen Rick Verbrugge ride him very well, and obviously they feel their Frenchman Sylvain Chavanel has got the chance of winning this bike race here this afternoon. This race is still, I think, going to change its face.
And why not? Chavanel making the best start ever to his professional seasons. He's got a clutch of wins already. Here we go back to the Kop van de Wedstrijd. It's a lovely language, Flemish. At the head of the road race is what it means virtually, as we're seeing here the last year's winner, one of the Italians who loves racing in Belgium in the winter. There aren't many Italians like doing it, but those that do usually win. And by the way, Paul Sherwin caught sight of another man who conquers these races quite frequently, or did. Michele Bartoli was at the start today.
Yes, he's a winner of this race and of course of Liège, Bastogne-Liège, and he said, I love Belgium, I like coming up here. It was always like the second home for me when I was racing. De Volder now stripping down, getting ready to race as well. He won't contribute at all to the success of this breakaway. The official time gap was 21 seconds, so it looks a lot less than that. Rick Verbrugge on the front here, a big strong man himself, a winner formerly of the Flèche Wallonne race, which is going to come up in a couple of weeks' time. Lots of chatting going on here on Race Radio because panic is starting to come on board. Bonen will be sitting in this main field just waiting to see how the other teams react. Although there's a large number of riders in here from Team High Road, I think they'll be very happy with their performance here this afternoon and content to have big George Hincapie sitting there in fourth place.
Just looking at the faces of those riders, that they gave me the impression they've got the breakaway under control, but they don't want to move to shut it down, because if they do, there'll be more attacks. So as we're looking here at these 5 riders, they're still clear, but the big question is for how long.
Next climb that they will be facing will be the 15th climb of the day, the Eikenmolen, a small climb of 610 meters, 12.5%. The leading group of 5 are there on the left-hand side, the Kop van de Wedstrijd. The group of 2 achtervolgers are the group of chasers at 21 seconds officially, but on these long straight roads now, Phil, they can actually see the leading group of 5, and that will encourage them to organise the chase. And look at De Volder, just sitting there looking over his shoulder. Come on, Tommeke, when are you coming up to take over the role of leader?
Yeah, I get that impression. He's not actually working here now. He's expecting them to come up. He's just sitting at the back collecting the tickets and just waiting for the arrival of the big chase behind now. And Langeveldt seen a little bit of sense too, because this youngster must be getting tired now at the back. He's ridden so well today. Hincapie too is not overworking up here. It's Ballan who seems to be continually driving at the front. He was the last one to catch this group and has been doing a lot of work. George has gone through now, and just the 3 of them working. The other 2 have shut down now, the Dutchman and the Belgian rider. They decided to wait and see how it develops. And there's the team time trial of motorcycles behind. They also, there's no team cars here noticeably, so the gap has been emptied by the teams.
Well, they've got everybody out of the gap because it's below that 30-second mark, and I think Hincapie riding sensibly. He knows how to ride tactically for success in a bike race like this. And just having a look there, Phil, I make that around about 17 seconds, so it is actually turning to the advantage of this group of chasers. The 5 men they are chasing, I think, are waiting for the catch.
They're waiting for the catch. These boys don't want to make the catch, because when they do, there'll be a load of counter-attacks coming their way. So they're just leaving that gap there. They've just said on the race radio 18 seconds, but I'll go with Paul Sherwin's watch. 17 it is.
Well, it's a top watch here, and I've used it for a number of years, and we're never usually very far out when it comes down to the time checks. Pipo Pozzato is obviously in this group. I can't see him, but the fact that we've got Team Liquigas all over the front end of it means that Pozzato is in there. He'll be looking for his win, and this gap is coming down now all of the time. I think they've shut off because, in fact, even Stijn de Volder has come to the front.
I have to say, this has been a terrific race today. And if all the races are like this, you may recall that Milan-San Remo was also a great fighting race this year. And it looks as though we're going to be treated to a wonderful classic season. Plenty more classics to come, not least Liège-Bastogne-Liège and the Amstel Gold Race, etc. Well, we're looking now at Liquigas, who really are the only ones left to work here, along with Cofidis, because everybody else that matters with favourites seem to have men in the front group, so they're just waiting. Leif Hoster's moved up. He's moved up to just behind, but he's no intention of doing any work. He's a clever boy, isn't he?
He certainly is very clever, but he, I think, was pretty courageous as well not to panic and ride himself back into this bike race when, on a number of occasions, riders who are a little bit spoiled would give up and say, oh, I've had a flat tyre at the wrong time, I don't want to get back into this race. He battled, he waited to get a new wheel, and he got himself back into the race. It took him a long time, almost 30 kilometres of chasing, but he never gave up.
He's a good professional, and he doesn't understand the Belgian road system. Nobody ever will, of course. Well, there's plenty of action there now as we pull back from the helicopter and just look to the right. The tail end of the bikes, there they are. It is getting desperately close now. Soon we're going to be treated to more attacks here as we head towards the 10 Boss climb. At hill number 15, I forgot we've been over the 10 Boss. I didn't turn the page of my book over. We're now heading to the Eikemolen, which will be climb 15. 3 to go. And dare I mention, the one at number 16 is the Wall of Gromont. Gerardsbergen's the town. They call it Church Hill, and it's a brute.
They call it Church Hill because over the top they go past the Capelle Muur. It's made it just that little bit longer over the last couple of years, but it is as difficult as it always has been. Last year we saw Tom Boonen get out of the saddle there to try and show his dominance in the race, but unfortunately he didn't have the legs to win it 3 years in a row. But I think this afternoon, tactically, things are starting to move towards his advantage. We're now slowly on this climb of Eikemolen, 600 metres, and it looks as if it has all come back together, but that's still a fairly large group. Once we go over the summit of this climb, Phil, we're looking at 10 kilometres to the Muur.
As we look down from the helicopter, we are approaching the Eikemolen, hill number 15, and they are about to be caught here. There they are, and it's been Liquigas doing all of the chasing with a little bit of assistance from Cofidis, and we're off again. As he saw them come up, Stein de Volder has launched an attack on the Eikemolen. 3 climbs to go, and he's the man to chase again, and again he's taking all of the pressure off Tom Boonen.
Well, as they say in Flemish, a nieuwe aanval van Stein de Volder. Now what he's trying to do here is completely take the pressure off his own teammate, and if all the big champions start to look at each other, he's got a chance of getting himself a surprise victory here this afternoon. He sat on that group for a little bit of time, Phil, to get himself a little bit of rest and recuperation. Felt this was the right opportune mine, and let's not forget we're looking at 10 kilometres, 6 miles to go to the Muur de Grammont. Everybody's thinking about the Muur and wanting to be economic with their energy. He's not got much left.
Now this is an interesting move because he might be set up here, he might be left to fry because nobody has countered the move, so he's got a chance to go alone, and that's another thing for them to ponder on now, because are they going to let the champion of Belgium win the Tour de Flanders, who they think is working for Tom Boonen, the former world champion? As Langeveld here now goes back towards the group, Stein de Volder continues to ride a brilliant ronde.
Well, as they say in Flemish, this man is a sterke manneke, a strong man, a beast of a man to take the responsibility of a move like that. And as you can see, Silence Lotto now they have to chase. This is the big battle of the Belgian teams in the Belgian race, the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Silence Lotto have to try and pull it all back together. Looks like a response there coming from Pipo Pozzato, who's moved up to the front. He's seen how dangerous that is.
Well, that was Greg van Avermaet of the Silence Lotto team there. He's another youngster with a great future, trying to do something to bring them back together in favour of Leif Hoster. Big Tom has got to the front, freewheels, blocks out the sunlight, and knows that his teammate and champion of his nation is up front. It's a good feeling right now.
It's a great feeling. Just 6 miles, though, to the big climb of the day in the final part of this race, the Muur de Grammont, the very famous Muur. Response now coming from Philippe Gilbert of Team Française des Jeux. He realises, oops, maybe I've made a tactical boo-boo here this afternoon, and we're not going to let a man like de Volder go clear. De Volder has the advantage, Phil, of being a very good individual time trialist. He knows how to ride on his own.
He's never been, to my knowledge, Paul, the champion time trialist of his country, which surprises me because he often wins his races, as he did this year, by winning the time trial and the Tour of the Algarve. And he's here he is as the road race champion of his country.
Thor Hushoft in the green jersey of Crédit Agricole now. They're all starting to think, oh guys, we can win this. We've still got a chance as they go through St. Martins-Lierde. And St. Martins-Lierde is not too far away from the outskirts of Gerardsbergen. It looks to me as if they're trying to muster themselves now to try and get the organisation into the front end of the field, and still Boonen is sitting there
I think Bonin has got the legs, Phil, to do something special on the Mur de Grammont, but if he can get his teammate to win, he'll play the role properly.
I think it's very generous of Thor Hushovd here, Paul, to actually do some work, because he's working for the team leader. The problem is he is the team leader, and you'd think he'd want to lie back a bit and let the other teams do the chasing.
Well, as he sweeps away there, I think he looked at the faces on all the other riders and thought, we've had a very long, hard chase here this afternoon. Maybe as everybody thinks about the Mur de Grammont, this is the time to go clear. In fact, he's forced a small group off the front end of the peloton. Again, putting that group of leaders on the defensive.
4 riders chasing here, just about. We might make it 5 or 6 or 7 in a moment's time, but this is now desperate times in this year's Tour de Flanders, and it's been a superb race so far. A little bit of help. I think it's Nick Noyens trying to come through there. This is going to be a difficult counter-attack to make it up.
This is Sylvain Chavanel who's made the move.
Chavanel.
He's the man that Team Cofidis were looking for here this afternoon. And this is great to see, because Chavanel for so long has promised to be a good bike rider for France. And finally he's reached maturity. Finally he's riding in these races like the team leader we've always expected him to be.
He comes to this race already with 4 victories this year. He's never done that before. I don't think he's ever won 4 races apart from 2005 in one season. And after he got a stage win in the Tour of the Mediterranean, I think that was at the top of Montferrand, Paul. He got 2nd overall in the Tour de Algarve. He became the leader of Paris-Nice after a stage win. And then, significantly, his last 2 victories have been right here in Belgium. He's ready for it today.
He's ready for it, but this race is not over. You know, we're looking really at a gap of 20 seconds between Stein de Volder, the small group of 4 riders in the middle, and the main field behind. It's all going to come together, I think. Tombak is the man who's got into this leading group as well. He really is riding a phenomenal race here this afternoon.
But how on earth did Tombak find the legs, having been in the breakaway all day when they got away on the Kleisberg, which seems last week, but it was only about 2 hours plus ago. And he still found the strength to try again at this stage of the race. Great riding.
Well, there are the 4 chasers. We're looking now at the lone leader, who's got himself 10 seconds advantage over these 4 chasers, who've only got themselves 5 seconds advantage over the front end of the main field, who are just in the chaos behind there of all of the motorbikes in this race.
Well, this race won't lie down today. There's clearly a lot of riders believe that if they play the cards right or get that little bit of luck, make the move and it works, they can win this race, because it seems to be one of those tours where it is uncontrollable.
12 seconds is the advantage of Stein de Volder over the 4 chasers, and maybe 3 or 4 seconds advantage over the front end of the group coming, which again, Phil, I think has split into a smaller group.
We're looking at 8 riders down there. Looking this way, though, looks to be a few more through the camera from the motorbike. Thor Hushovd swings off the front. And this is Chavanel. Oh dear me, he's gone into the box. He tried to pinch that motorbike and he borrowed ours instead. But Chavanel continues on.
It's not his fault. He's not cheating. It's the responsibility of the motorbikes to get out of the way. And there are a lot of motorbikes trying to get themselves the shot of the day here this afternoon. The move that is going to change the result of the overall race here. I can't see Stein de Volder, but he can't be very far away from those 4 riders. He's probably in the first gaggle of motorbikes just at the top of the picture.
Completely lost now, but he is there. He was just peeping in, and he's got a lead, I would say, 8 to 10 seconds over this group of 4 riders. As we're looking now at Chavanel, the man in the red, Thor Hushovd is here, Quinziato, and Yannick Tombek. The race is now bound for climb number 16, the Muur, the wall of Gerardsbergen, and the champion of Belgium is the man who's taking us towards it.
Well, he's got all of the responsibility now of Team Quickstep on his shoulders. He's putting a lot of pressure onto the race, and he has got the advantage of knowing that if this move doesn't work for him, his teammate can take over the race behind him, because I feel today that still, even though he's not in this small counter move going clear, Tom Bonin has the legs. This is Yannick Tombak trying to get off the front end of the main field. He's caught out the men who were with him. Just a little bit further back in the green there is Thor Hushovd. A little bit further back, Sylvain Chavanel in the red jersey of Team Cofidis, and just sticking on the back there, of course, Pippo Pozzato.
Well, I reckon the Latvian here on the left must have stopped at the local pits and changed his legs, because that was a tremendous piece of riding to find the strength to get into this move, this quality of riders after having been in the previous breakaway. But he was the strongest man in that breakaway when it was brought back, of course. We are looking now as we go towards the wall of Gerardsbergen. Remember, we will cross the town first before we start the cobble climb. No change here. We are still chasing Stein de Volder with 4 riders and just behind 9 more coming up.
Well, these riders have lost their belief in success, Phil, because they're all looking over their shoulders constantly to see the position of the chase group. Well, there it is. It's not much more than 100 metres as we go through the town of Deftinge. And just for a little bit of local knowledge, I just happen to know that Deftinge is the home of Ferdy van den Houten, a former teammate of mine who was also a winner of Gent-Wevelgem.
Used to ride for La Redoute alongside Paul Sherwin. The gaps officially are 18 seconds Stein de Volder to the chase group we've just seen, and then 28 seconds to the next group. Last time we saw them there were 9, but there might be more by now. De Volder though looks as though he's going to be first onto the wall. There's the chapel, dead centre in your picture. The church at the top, the Kapelmuur, the chapel hill. And it looks as though Stein de Volder, I wonder how many times he's raced to Gerardsbergen or even trained through here. He's a man of Flanders.
Well, he is an unbelievable man in a solo effort like this. Thor Hushoff now is the next man. There's Yannick Tombak. There you can just see Sylvain Chavanel, but the group are hovering there, waiting for the moment when they can move forward.
Sylvain Chavanel, a Frenchman, can you believe that, in at the kill in the Tour of Flanders. Only 3 French riders have ever won this race, and Chavanel now right there.
That's Kinziato, in fact, in there for Team Liquigas, but all of the other big names are around about 5 seconds in arrears. You can see in that small group there, George Hincapie is very much present, as is Tom Bonen, as is Leif Hoster. The big men are all waiting for to pounce, Phil, and I think they're actually all going to pounce once we get to the Muur, the Kapelmuur, the Muur de Gramont, in 1.8 kilometres time.
The penultimate climb of this year's Tour of Flanders. For many of these riders, it will be their last climb because they'll fall away from the race, really will fall away this time. Hushoff, Chavanel, Quinziato, Tombak, they will get there just behind Stein de Volder. Hincapie, Bonen, Hoster, big favourites in the group at 28 seconds from the leader, just 10 seconds behind the Hushoff group. It's going to be the grand battle of the stones of the Kapelmuur, and who comes out on top could well run to the finish.
And let's not forget, once they've gone over the top of the Muur with 16 kilometres to go, they've got to figure out who is going to be the boss of the Bosberg. That used to be a man by the name of Edwig van Hooijdonk, but very often the Bosberg, the final climb of the day at just 12 kilometres remaining, tells you who has got the strong legs in the Tour of Flanders.
That is the last climb where the strong riders put the nails in the coffin of the others, as now CSC are still trying to drag Fabian Cancellara back into the fray here. Just look at the speed of that bunch. They're showing no respect at all for the climb which lies ahead here in Gerardsbergen as we race through the marketplace. So it looks like we're going to head down to Gerardsbergen, split by 28 seconds the spread between Stein de Volder and the Hincapie group.
That is a very long line, and you see, I still don't want to take anything away from the tactical way that Tom Bonen is riding this race here this afternoon. He's let his team do all of the work. He's come out and shown us how strong he is on a number of occasions. That's what makes me feel that Tom Bonen has got it in his legs here this afternoon. The Tweede Achtervolgers, the second chasing group. We're now in the outskirts of Gerardsbergen.
We are now in the streets of Gerardsbergen as the look at the crowd here. This is the narrow approach to hill number 16 of 17 climbs, but this is the Brute, the 5-star here, climb of the wall. No change at the moment. We've got 1 leader, 4 chasers, and then Hincapie in that bunch there. That's the situation. They snap back. Hushoff, Chavanel, Quinziato, Tombak. There's now 1 against the rest.
Well, one man is hoping to survive the Kop van de Wegstrijd. He would certainly like to see that. He's a Flemish-speaking rider. He knows this is the front of the bike race. If you think that the popularity of the sport of professional cycling is diminishing in Europe, just have a look at this. The crowds have turned out on the town square here. This is right in the bottom of the climb of Gerardsbergen. He'll go through the town square, over the place, and then he'll take the famous right-hand bend onto the Muur itself. 19.8% is the maximum gradient. It says 475 metres, but it's a lot longer than that from Gerardsbergen in the bottom to Kapelmuur in the top.
This is a very, very cruel climb here, and pictures are sprinkled over the 100 years of the Tour of Flanders. Well, nearly 100 years. It's 100 years if you take out the World Wars. And now they're seeing the champion of Belgium fly the flag all the way up the cobblestones here. Reaction coming yet again now because they picked up Quinziato. Liquigas still think they can win with Pizzato.
Well, in the middle there, in the dark black and red jersey of Silence Lotter was Leif Hoster, but this man is trying to survive. Juan Antonio Fletcher now, he loves this bike race. He wants to make the move. Fabian Cancellara on his shoulder. I don't think I've ever seen a Spanish rider dominate the Mur de Grammont like this.
Well, he's come here to win, and as he's told us, no Spanish riders made the first 10 throughout the history of the Tour de Flanders. He's in the making here. He's had a second in Paris-Roubaix, second in Het Volk, but he'd love to repeat all of that with a second in the Tour of Flanders. This is a big move here, because look at this. This is the most unusual climb here, because they're not putting down the hammer like we thought.
Well, they haven't got to the real steep part of the climb yet. Tom Bonen was in there over to the left-hand side, looking nice and comfortable. He won't make any big moves at all here, Phil, because he will still defend the position of Stein de Volder. These guys have still got to catch the champion of Belgium.
Well, this looks like it might be Christian Knies here of Germany who's made a move for Milram. He's got over the top first, but they've made rather little of that hill, a lot less than we thought. Look at the group coming up, Paul. That's most unusual. Now, meanwhile, at the front, the second kick of the climb.
Well, it seems like Chavanel has slipped to the back end of this group, but this is a great move here. He's come first onto this massive climb of the Mur de Grammont, the wall of Gerardsbergen. You can see how difficult the climb is, but he's still got the power, he's still got the punch in those pedals, and he still does not have that group behind him. He could survive, and that would be a monumental ride.
I've never seen de Volder ride like this. All day long, I've been convinced he's been softening the field up for Tom Bonen to bite back at the finish. But this man is now committed here, and Bonen won't chase him down. He'd be delighted if Stein de Volder won this race. This is the narrow, horrible little section, the section where Paul Sherwin used to walk in the days of the Tour of Flanders, but it normally reduces men to mortals here. And look at Juan Antonio Fletcher. He's seen his team work for him all day, but at the end of everything, it comes down to the leader to do it himself.
Coming after him there is Nick Noyens, there is Tom Bonen, Alessandro Ballan, Fabian Cancellara, all of the big names. There is Pipo Pozzato coming up to the front as well.
And third up the climb is Vladimir Gusev, who's also moving up into the action. There's the chapel, and once you see the chapel, no bells ringing, but you go over the top, and there's no real big descent off the top of this either. And this is the group, and there is the chase group continuing now as they try to close down. Desperate moments now in the Tour of Flanders.
Nick Noyens, but look at Tom Bonen there. He's on the defensive. He's sitting there waiting to see Alessandro Ballan struggling, but he's slightly injured, but he won't give up. He's a proud bike rider. The man in there for Team Milram, by the way, is Nicky Terpstra, again trying to keep himself in this bike race. Had a little bit of bad luck, but everybody wants to ride well in the Ronde van Vlaanderen. You do not give up. You fight all the way. There's Hincapie coming round now. Still looking pretty confident, still in with a chance of a top 10 or 15 position.
Well, it's going to have to reassess exactly where they sit in this race once they're over the top of this climb now, because did you see the face there on Alessandro Ballan? Gritting his teeth, but very much in contact with the head of this race, and looking like he's heading towards a big finish once more. But this rider is now onto good roads here. He's bound for the final climb of the day, the Bosberg, and it's a 4-star climb, and it's not so severe, but it's where it's placed on the course that makes it so vital to the format.
Well, that's right. It's 3 kilometres after the Mur de Grammont. It's a very wide road, but from the top of the Bosberg, there's just 12 kilometres to go to the finish. You can see here there's a massive move by Team Astana, but in the group behind, Juan Antonio Fletcher is shadowed there by Tom Bonen, Alessandro Ballan, and this is the man they all want to catch. They're coming now out of Gerardsbergen, and this is de Volder now just sitting up. I think he was looking for a bottle, he was looking for some assistance, but he's got to keep himself in that individual time trial position. Bonen, Phil, to me, still looks good.
Well, whatever's happened, he's telling the service cars here with the brand new clean wheels, all waiting. That's Gregory Rast of Astana, who's had a brilliant ride today. Johan Bruneel would love a victory, of course. So he could cock a hoop at the organisers of the Tour de France, who won't let his team ride this year. Fletcher says, all right, you've chased me down, come and help me chase this man down.
Bonen says, no, I won't, because it's my teammate in front, it's Stein de Volder. You want to win this bike race, guys, you've got to pull back my teammate into the fold. I'm just going to sit here nice and pretty. If you pull him back, then I'm going to hit you hard.
Well, this is now every man for himself here, as if it wasn't a few moments ago. And the ride being done is by Stein de Volder, because he's thinned that race out to a very select chase group, and as far as we know, they aren't making any impression.
We're still looking at 14 seconds, the difference between Stein de Volder and that group of riders behind. But the more they mess about, the more the advantage is going to turn towards the champion of Belgium. They will not get any help at all from Tom Bonen. He's just going to sit there. If it comes back together towards the end, Phil, and there's a group of 10 or 15, it doesn't matter, because Bonen has still got the sprint to win this race.
Well, you saw some of the names. Here they are. Gregory Rast is the rider on the far right for Astana there. The last year's winner, riding a superb defence of his title as he leads them through the streets here. Alessandro Ballan is flying the flag again for an Italian in the Tour of Flanders. And Nick Noyens is sitting in there just behind him. He was working with Chabanel, but what a great second gun he's turning out to be.
There is Stein de Volder. Race radio just crackled to give him a 19-second advantage. There is no organisation in this chasing group, and I'm sure that's because of the fact sitting on the back of it is big Tom Bonen, because they know if they work too hard to pull back Stein de Volder, he's going to win this bike race for this team. And he doesn't want to chase because he'd love to see his teammate win while he's wearing the jersey of the champion of Belgium. What a glory that would be.
We are just under the banner as we've started now the final climb of the day, which is the Bosberg. It's 4 stars, but it's crucial now to the combination of the race. And we're looking at Stein de Volder clear on the climb through Gerardsberg and over the Muur. Tom Bonen has joined a chase group of 6, which is Gregory Rast of Astana, Fletcher of Rabobank, Noyens and Cofidis, Ballan last year's winner, Bonen, and there's going to be a counter move immediately from the group as they approach the climb.
Well, this is young Langeveld once again. He doesn't care at all about this bike race. He's really found something special, but they've lost more time. It's 20 seconds now to Stein de Volder. Tom Bonen just sitting there. Carry on, guys. You're the big names in the sport. You want to win, you chase. I'm just sitting here.
Well, this is an interesting move now, but where is Sebastian finding the legs at his age? 22 years of age, 23 next December. A man of the future for sure. Stein de Volder, well, he's not quite as young as Langeveld, but he's certainly a star today. There's the climb now up through the woods here. It's a good road surface, and once we're over the top, it's all man for himself as they race towards the finish.
Well, it's just inside of 1,000 metres in length. It's 11% at the maximum part of the climb and an average of 6%, but more importantly, I think, Phil, the summit is just 12 kilometres to go.
It looks like curtains for that chase group. Leif Hoster was off to the right. I think he's done for. He's looking very tired. The chase mare finished him off. Sebastian Langeveld here trying to lead that very select group of riders. And, well, I said it was smooth, but I forgot about the little bit at the top. They're not severe, these cobblestones, but they do shake you around just a bit.
Well, he's got himself 20 seconds. If he's got 20 or 25 seconds at the top of this climb of the Bosberg, he's got a very good chance of going down towards the finish line as the winner, wearing the resplendent jersey of champion of Belgium on his shoulders. But it's still a tall order. He's being chased in second place here by Langeveld. But there are a lot of big names in that group with Tom Bonen, Phil, and I think they may well get themselves organised over the summit here of the Bosberg.
Well, there he is, and there is the distance, and the group more or less together behind here now as he comes up towards the top of the climb. Is he just still a carrot for Bonen to just come by and win the race, or is he actually going for gold himself? It's up to the race behind. They are the only ones with the answer now. As Sebastian Langeveld, another faithful teammate all day, still dictating affairs in second.
Well, isn't it funny how the camera does tell a few lies there? It looked as if he was riding very easily across the gap, but he's only halved it, because as he rides off the cobblestones, he's looking for 10 seconds to find the man at the front of this race, and the group behind him are really only looking for 20. This race is far from over, and this man now has to compose himself and get back into that time trialing position, but his body must be screaming out for surrender.
Well, there is the group, and Leif Hoster, I think, has joined this leading group, and I'm just hearing on race radio that Fabian Cancellara has been dropped here. So the pressure today is affecting riders in very strange ways. The sun is out now, they're all ready for a sunshine finish. The finish not very far away, but it's still a matter of chase and chase. There's no respite here. Nobody's getting chance to recover, to put in their own attack.
Well, this man now, Stein de Volder, champion of Belgium, formerly a Discovery Channel rider from last year, is now trying to win himself, I would say, his biggest ever victory after, of course, the Belgian National Championships. But sometimes the Belgians regard the Tour of Flanders as even bigger than the championship of their own country or the championship of the world, because it is their own personal world championships. He's got 10 seconds advantage. That really is not enough to win. They've dropped the neutral service car there to get behind him. That's to assist him if he has a flat tire or a
mechanical incident. Well, he's got himself, according to Race Radio, 28 seconds, but I calculated only 20 when they summited.
Well, the spread is across 40 seconds now, which is not very much, is it? We're still a little way to ride down to the finish. De Volder's got 18 seconds over Sebastian Langeveld. There he is. 28 seconds over the group containing Tom Bonen and last year's winner Alessandro Ballan, and 40 seconds to what is left of the Tour of Flanders.
There is Fabian Cancellara. He's winning the group there with, of course, Tom Bonen. Fletcher now was looking to get himself a podium position. Now's the moment where they're all starting to play that little tactical game. Will I chase? Should I chase? I'm losing the Tour of Flanders, and if they don't get themselves organised, they have lost the Tour of Flanders here. Leif Hosterfield was, as you said, is definitely in the group, and he's done a good move to get himself back into this bike race after all of the bad luck that he's had.
Well, Cancellara, having thought he was dropped, in fact, they must have been saying in Flemish he was catching that group. He's obviously joined it, and also Leif Hoster should be there. We'll wait for confirmation when we see that group, but I think they've crossed the gap and have joined that chasing group. There's certainly more riders there than were there before. One rider out in front, 10 kilometres to go, 6 miles from the finish, around about 12 to 13 minutes to race. That's all Stijn de Volder that stands between him and the greatest moment of his life.
Well, we're still looking at 10 to 12 seconds at disadvantage for the rider in second position there, and it is around about 25 seconds to the group of Cancellara and Tom Bonen. Again, well, another. Oh, that was a very nasty move there. The motorbikes are getting a little bit too race there, and that move indication by Gregory Ras was a sign of not being too happy with the motorbike driver.
I think that's what he meant, yeah. Very polite young man. As we now see the one man here, resplendent in the colours of his national champions jersey. And what better colours to show to the Belgians? They're all smiles, I can tell you. Looking out of our comedy box here, there's a huge grandstand. There must be 500-600 people in the grandstands here, and they're all just one big smile right now. And this rider's not looking like cracking.
Well, what a man Tom Bonen in that second group behind there, Phil. He is riding as an incredible teammate. He really wants to win this race. He writes his name into the history books if he could win it for a third time, but he's giving everything up to try and give the advantage to his man at the front.
And just look at this rider here, Sebastian Langeveld. He's riding about 15 seconds, if that, ahead of the chase group, which has been strengthened by Cancellara certainly, and Leif Host, we believe, and he's holding them off. He's also doing the ride of his life. Inside 10 kilometres to go. The champion out front. Second place is Langeveld, and then this very select group containing the winner from a year ago, Alessandro Ballan. His last 3 rides here in Flanders, 1st, 5th and 6th.
Well, he loves this race, he certainly does. This young man is making a name for himself. We'll see him come back to the Belgian Flanders again in the future, because as you've said a number of times this afternoon, he's not going to be 23 years old until December of this year, but he seems to be losing a little bit of his impetus, and this man, as he gets closer to the finish, Stijn de Volder, will find some strength, the kind of strength that you can only find when you know you're on the edge of a massive performance, and that's what he's on the edge of here this afternoon. His body will all of a sudden start to go numb. He won't feel that pain anymore, because he'll know he can keep this pressure going for those incredible 10 more minutes that remain for him.
Well, the thing is that Sebastian Langeveld doesn't know much about this, what it's like to win the Tour of Flanders. He hasn't had many shots at it, but certainly de Volder does, and he's a quality bike rider, de Volder, because last year he finished 3rd in the Tour of Switzerland, apart from winning the time trial stage of the 3 days of the Panna, which has just gone by again this year. But I think he's beginning to nose away here at the moment.
Well, the gap is officially given at just 14 seconds and 31 seconds to the group of the big contenders. The big contenders being Ballan, Tom Bonen and Fabian Cancellara. So they are not really gaining at all on this man, and all he's got to do is keep himself nice and consistent. You have to bear in mind, isn't it strange that the man who spotted this rider as an amateur was no other than Johan Bruneel, and he was also the man that made Tom Bonen turn professional in the early part of his career too.
Well, his new book is just out, something, I've forgotten the title of it at the moment.
We might as well win.
He might as well win. Well, he seems to have picked all the riders that can win, and at some stage he's had them on his team, but he's lost them, of course. You can't always keep them. Other teams offer them more money. They tempted Tom Bonen away, and he went But this is a group now which is looking as though it's getting a little bit tired.
Well, this is Yannick Tombak, who's managed to get off the front of the group, followed there by Gregory Rast, and just sitting on the back there, Juan Antonio Fletcher. They have caught out the big names there, and they're making one final dash to try and pull this man back into the fold. But every kilometre that goes by, he will be dreaming of victory here on the road of Meerbeek, a very famous finishing straight. It's been here, the finish of the Tour of Flanders, for a long number of years, and every Belgian rider knows about it. This is the man in second position, Langeveld, starting to suffer a bit. Look at those shoulders starting to rock, and in fact he's about to get caught there by the group containing his teammate Fletcher. Now that may well turn the tables the other way.
Well, I've never seen a finale to a Tour of Flanders quite like this one. Everybody is on their upper limits right now, and there's so many new names attacking the favourites. Let's have a little swing round here. They come again. They're coming back together, I think. Very shortly, it is going to be everyone. Nick Noyen's trying to get across the gap. It's going to be everyone against Stein de Volder, I think. Also moving up, Big Tom, gritting his teeth. Every right to follow the wheels. He's not damaging de Volder's lead, and that's the plan. Also in this group, you can see now is Hincapie also getting across. It is still anybody's race, Paul.
It's anybody's race, and now they've pulled Langeveld back into the fold, and I would like to think that these teams will get themselves a little bit organised. One man who won't join the organisation or the party will be Tom Bonen, because he wants the party to be on board of Team Quickstep in the bus here this afternoon. Now getting out of the saddle, fighting. You can feel the tension in the crowd mounting here. They want a Flandrian to win. They want a Belgian to win. They're applauding every time they see him on the big screen.
I'm laughing because I think we just had 3 cheers on the finishing line here for Stein de Volder. They're certainly shouting out there. It's a bit premature, I believe, at the moment, because these boys have not given up. Yet Stein de Volder, this is Juan Antonio Fletcher, another desperate move here to try and crack the field and make the move. You know, Stein de Volder has never been a man for the single-day classics. He's a man for the stage races. He's won quite a few in his life. He's had 13 wins, but this might be a move on to lucky 14 for him. Well, he's won only a stage in the Tour of Italy, a Tour of Spain rather, where he wore the golden jersey in that race. But basically, he's never been a man to score on a one-day classic.
Well, Fletcher has made the move here. Fabian Cancellara started to chase him down, but he was immediately covered by Bonen, so he turned off the chase and the pacemaking at the front. They're getting a little bit frustrated there with Tom Bonen, because after all, he's playing the defensive role. He's putting everything to the one side, but there is the neutral service car in front. There is Leif Hoster now. He's going to try and make the move. You know, Phil, this could all come back together inside the final kilometre. This is the second place rider on the road, Juan Antonio Fletcher. He's only looking for 10 seconds.
We're looking now at the last desperate moments here of all of the favourites in the Tour of Flanders, chasing the champion of Belgium, Stein de Volder, and the man who's closest to him now is the big Spanish favourite, Juan Antonio Fletcher. But Bonen is still back in that group and just waiting for the chance to counter the move, I feel sure.
Well, it's not very much more than 10 seconds there. You can see the blue neutral service vehicle behind this man, Stein de Volder. 10 seconds back to Juan Antonio Fletcher, who, if he catches Stein de Volder, I am sure will go on to win this race, but still only another 5 or 6 seconds behind are still all of the big favourites.
Well, this is a doer battle, and it's far from decided. There is Juan Antonio Fletcher trying to become the first Spanish rider to crack the top 10 ever in the Tour of Flanders, and more than that, he's trying to win the race for Spain. He's threatened it last year, second in Het Volk, second he was in Paris-Roubaix, and he could well be second in the Tour of Flanders right now.
Well, he's pulling himself inside out. This is a final false flat here, just on the outskirts of Ninove, as we now look to get down to the flat part of the course and the run in towards the final kilometre. But I've never seen Fletcher pull his body apart like that. He realises he's on the edge of something very famous indeed for a Spanish rider. They're pulling out now the neutral service vehicle as we pull back. We're looking for 5 seconds here for Juan Antonio Fletcher. He's going to catch him before the end, and then what's going to happen?
Well, it's happened to Stein de Volder, sorry, I was thinking of Leif Hoster. It's happened to Leif Hoster before, being caught in sight of the line, so he knows what it's like to finish second. He's got himself into that chase group behind, but it may not be good enough now. I think that was 4 kilometres to go to the finish here. At just 4 kilometres, 2.5 miles to the line for Stein de Volder. He really has been a superb man at this race. No way is he a fortunate winner. He has led over most of the climbs today.
He's looking 5.5 minutes of effort left down towards the finish line. This is the false flat on the outskirts of Ninove and Meerbeke. And there, this man is looking at the carrot in front of the donkey. The carrot on this occasion is Stijn de Volder, the national champion of Belgium, who is hoping to win this bike race here this afternoon. But look at Fletcher. Look at his body. He's pulling himself any which way he can. He's a contortionist trying to get as much power out of that body as possible.
Well, let's remember that Stijn de Volder last year won the Tour of Austria by virtue of his great time trialling skills on stage 7. This year he won the Tour de Algarve, same reason, his time trialling skills on stage number 4. Now he's having to time trial to take out the greatest classic of them all.
Nick Nuyens is coming across the gap now as well for Cofidis. So we've got in the first 3 places on the road 3 individual riders. There's Nuyens, number 65 in the red shorts of Team Cofidis. We are now looking at just 3 kilometres left to go to the finish. Nuyens looks over his shoulder. This is so terribly desperate for the man that I think we all want to win now, Stijn de Volder, because he's been at the front of this bike race over all of the big climbs. He's worked like a Trojan for his team leader Tom Bonen, and now he may well lose it in the final 1,000 yards.
Nick Nuyens, who knows what it's like to break the top 10. He was 7th in this race 1 year ago. Fletcher's seen him coming. This will be something of a light relief for Juan Antonio, because he could do with a break right now, because look up the road and Stijn de Volder is still riding them off his wheel and out of sight. The kilometres are ticking off here. Soon it'll be the right turn. Then he will see the finish, and then he will know what it's like as a champion of Belgium to win the Tour of Flanders. But it's not over yet. Look at that blanket finish.
You've got the whole of the race there, Phil, in about 20 seconds. These are the 2 chasers now, and a little bit of assistance coming from Juan Antonio Fletcher. Nick Nuyens, a Belgian, is chasing down a Belgian. That's always a difficult thing in the press the next day, but it's all about winning this bike race. At this stage of the game, it's nothing to do with what country you come from. At 2 kilometres to go, it's about getting across the line and winning. It doesn't matter where you're from.
Under the 2 kilometre banner, another huge crowd here, another huge cheer rather from the crowd. 2 kilometres inside, 2 miles to go, just over 1 mile in fact. The tandem now is a Spanish-Belgium tandem, and if they don't get up there in the next 1,000 metres, they're racing for 2nd place. I don't think they'll close it now.
It's 14 seconds officially to the 2 chasers there, who are looking a little bit raggedy, and this man, we've said a number of times, is a very good individual time trialist. It's 24 seconds back to the group containing Tom Bonen. Every time he puts his head down, he gets himself into that time trialing position. He makes himself a little bit more aero. His body must be going through turmoil at the moment, but if he can get to that finishing corner in first place, he knows he's got this in the bag, and what a great victory for a Flandrian.
Well, the way these boys are looking over the shoulders as they still try to finish it off here, they are racing for 2nd place and worried about the chase from behind. I think Stijn de Volder has pulled off the big coup today. He's ridden this race in favour of Bonen, and he's going to finish it off for himself. Absolutely superb demonstration. Oops, nearly overshot that one.
Well, he's getting a little bit nervous. That's something that he's been waiting for. He looks over his shoulder. He allows himself the advantage to look back and see what the gap is. 1 kilometre to go, and he's looking at a 10-second advantage. He's not going to be able to enjoy this coming up the finishing straight, because he's going to have to go and take it all the way to the line. Here are the chasers. Fletcher now looks over his shoulders too to see Nick Nuyens a little bit further back. They know the group are there. This is a desperate struggle, but I think he's finally got this one in the bag.
Well, he's not the first champion of Belgium to cross the line wearing the national champion's jersey, but he certainly is going to be very special here. He's now 27 years of age, 28 years of age now, Stijn de Volder. His birthday coming in August this year, just after the end of the Olympic Games in Beijing, where I'm sure he'll be going after a demonstration like this on a one-day race. He's never before approached a victory in a one-day classic race, and now he's approaching the finishing line as the winner of an absolute vintage edition of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. He deserves it.
He certainly deserves this, and there you can see the two chasers. Now he can look over his shoulder. He knows he's got it. That's the moment of victory. That's the moment of great enjoyment.
Well, Stijn de Volder, as champion, takes the victory today. He doesn't believe it. He never raced for the win today. It came his way 3 hills out, and he never looked back. There's the big crowd who cheered him all the way home, and a huge, huge grin on all of their faces as Stijn de Volder crossing the line. The sprint for second place here. Well, Juan Antonio Fletcher will get third behind Nick Noyens, but that's the best finish ever by a Spanish cyclist in the history of this event. But that's the way the race has been today, and it's finished off in a very tight sprint there, and George Hincapie, with a smile on his face, has finished alongside Alessandro Ballan.
But as I noticed there, Tom Bonan was very happy to sit up and celebrate there. Great win for Patrick Lefevre in there with his team as well, because tactically they rode a superb race here this afternoon. This man rode with sheer courage, though, Stein de Volder, over those final few kilometres. I'll tell you one thing, Phil, tomorrow morning he's going to have a sore body.
Well, you could bet your life, but it'll be a happy one. He might have a sore tummy too, because I'm sure he'll be celebrating tonight here in the town, as only the Belgians can. This is a wonderful country to be a champion in the sport of cycling. And Stein de Volder now looks as though he's about to break down here as reality dawns. He has just won a terrific version of the Ronde van Vlaanderen.
Well, he certainly has done that, and you know, he knew all the time in the back of his mind if he was to fail, he could still count upon Tom Bonan. But Bonan, I think, tonight will be just as happy as if he'd won this bike race himself.
So the Tour of Flanders is history for the year 2008 as the champion of Belgium, Stein de Volder. Well, he's just become the 65th Belgian to win this event. He should be happy with that. And there it is, all smiles. The black top of his jersey. Another victory for Patrick Lefevre. That man turns out classic winners every year, one way or another. It wasn't perhaps the way he thought it would happen. He probably expected former world champion Tom Bonan, but indeed it was Stein de Volder who made the line first.
Well, a great way to do it as well, Phil, to be able to ride over those final few kilometres on your own, knowing you don't have to hold anything back and worry about the sprint finish down towards the end. It's a great way to win, and I think the added advantage to him this afternoon was he won this race as the national champion, and that is a photograph I think will go onto the wall for many, many years to come.
A true champion in every way. There's the Quick-Step team welcoming him home. And there must be hearts in the mouth at some stage there, because I really thought he was going to get nailed back on the Cap of Muir. It wasn't to be. He climbed it in the saddle, full power all the way, went over the top, and after that it was a matter of time. There's Patrick Lefevre he's congratulated all the big winners of the early spring classics at some time or other, I guess.
Well, he certainly has. He's won nearly all of them with Team Quick-Step, and the great thing is, I think, he's brought together a serious squad for the classics. They've always had a hard time putting together a man to ride high in the overall classification, but when it comes to the one-day races, they certainly have been the best.
This was the race that Sean Kelly always wanted to win. He won all of the others. He could never win this one. He finished third 3 times, but never got the win. We are looking at the remnants of the group coming home, as they just come home in small groups now, but all of them still trying to reach the line. Very tight sprint, that. As it, the rider I think I might have took it out was Kurt Hubelink, that's why I didn't recognise him. He rides on the Top Sport team.
Well, here we can see the winner of the day getting his hat on for the interview. And we actually haven't got any.
Stein de Volder, hoofdschudder, je gelooft het nog altijd niet. Je hebt de Ronde van Vlaanderen gewonnen, en op welke manier?
Ik kan het gewoon niet geloven.
I can't believe that I've won this.
Ik heb er gewoon geen woorden voor. Het zal nog een tijdje duren voor ik echt besef dat ik de Ronde van Vlaanderen gewonnen heb, denk ik.
Je zat in een verloren ontsnapping, dan worden jullie ingerekend met dat 5-tal. En dan ga je, en het is nog bijzonder ver.
Ja, ik zat te wachten. Wilfried Peters zei constant niet rijden. Tom kwam achter en het kwam er op een ideaal moment bij voor mij. En, ik wist dat na de Eikenmolen wind mee was tot aan Bosberg, zeg maar. Ik was heel goed.
I felt really good.
Ik had heel goede benen.
Excellent legs.
Dat was gewoon een tijdrit tot aan de aankomst. Maar na het Bosberg was het echt heel zwaar. Wind op kop constant. En ik denk dat ik nog nooit in mijn leven zo hard heb afgezien als dat stuk naar de Bosberg tot aan de aankomst.
Ja, tegen de wind, zoeken naar de juiste versnelling. En wist je hoeveel je voorsprong was?
Ja, ik had wat miserie met mijn oortje. En, ik wist eigenlijk nooit hoeveel voorsprong dat ik had. En moest constant vragen aan de montage eigenlijk. hoeveel voorsprong dat ik had. En dan de Bosberg was gewoon alles
I was getting information from the guy on the motorbikes, and once I got to the top of the Bosberg, I knew I had a really good chance of getting myself the victory.
Soms zeggen woorden veel minder dan een beeld.
Well, there we have the result. Stijn de Volder, the winner today. Nick Noyens getting second. A 1-2 for Belgium, but a Spanish rider on the podium as well. Alessandro Ballan fourth this time. He's a fifth, sixth and a first now. George Hincapie is the best American again in a classic. Fifth for him. Pizzato in sixth. And Kurt Assel Arvesen of Norway getting there in seventh. Well, it was a memorable race to say the least, and most of the favourites were in the frame at one stage or another. Stijn de Volder certainly wasn't an outsider by any manner of means, but as he says, he couldn't believe it. He actually has won the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and that to a Belgian, and if you're the national champion as well, is really very, very special.
Well, George, you rode with all the right moves today, but unfortunately you missed the one when Stijn de Volder went at the end.
Yeah, we had a good breakaway with 5 of us going, and Stijn wasn't working. Obviously, because he had Boone in behind, it was a really the only tactic they can play. And as we were getting caught, Stijn took a risk, went in the break, and he was gone. He rode an awesome race, and I'm happy for him.
Strange that he's a former teammate of yours, but at the end when he moved, was it because the main group was so close behind you thought, well, they're going to chase him down?
Yeah, well, we were getting caught, and he went as soon as we were getting caught. And quick at the time, Liquid Gas and Cofidis were chasing, and I guess they put in a big effort to catch us. So once they caught us, Stijn was gone. They had nothing left, and it was really a good move.
You must be happy with the form though, because you showed you were able to go with all the right moves, and you were with every move apart from the one of de Volder's. Happy for the form?
Yeah, today was extremely tough race. My legs were not the best they've been, but I'm happy with the way they went, and hopefully next Sunday I'll be a lot better.
I think riding a race like this and seeing you had so many teammates in the group behind you gives you good confidence for Paris-Roubaix.
Yeah, the team's awesome. We got some really experienced riders on this team. We all get along well, and we all just want to win the races.
Well, Tyler, that was a tough day. I've been to a lot of Tour of Flanders in my time, but I've very rarely seen one quite as hard.
Yeah, well, it was a little bit of everything for the weather today, and that definitely made things interesting on some of the steep cobble climbs with the rain and hail and snow and everything. But it's a lot of fun, I think this is probably the most beautiful race in the world, so this was a true Tour of Flanders, I think.
Well, for some of your teammates, it was the first time I bet they went into this with a certain amount of trepidation and fear.
Yeah, I think everyone was kind of looking at the weather forecast last night going, oh boy. But, we were pretty lucky. We stayed dry for the first 120K or something like that. And then, by the time it got nasty, we were riding hard. So you stayed warm, but it was pretty slippery on some of the climbs.
Pretty important, though, for the guys to learn, because next weekend is Paris-Roubaix, and that's a race that Magnus Backstedt really has a chance of winning. So they had to learn a lot today.
Yeah, I think this was really good for everybody just to kind of, do the biggest classic in the world and kind of get one in the legs before next week. So Magnus says he's feeling pretty good, so I think it'll be good, a nice day.
Well, you're back on form now after a good start at the Amgen Tour of California and a sad withdrawal, but back in Europe and back on the high road.
Yeah, so far so good, Things have been going pretty well. I had a pretty bad crash at Paris-Nice that kind of laid me low for a few weeks, but I'm over that now and healthy, no problems, knock on wood. So hopefully I can keep it rolling for another week.
Great, we'll see you next week.
Thanks a lot.
Well, in the slipstream bus here with Magnus Backstedt. Magnus, that was a pretty tough day today.
It was very difficult because of the weather conditions, and you had to be at the front at the right time. And to be honest with you, it was almost more luck if you were at the front at the right time than legs, And unfortunately, I messed up a bit coming into the Eau de Quarmont and basically kept chasing for the rest of the day. And I got back on, but always right at the wrong time. And it was just one of those days, But I got a good workout, so I'm looking forward to next weekend instead.
That's the important thing, is because this race gives you a little bit of a warm-up for Paris-Roubaix. Shows you how the legs are, shows you how the position is on the bike for the cobblestones.
Yeah, definitely. If you got the feel on the cobblestones, and I was floating over them today. So, I'm looking forward to next week, and I got a good training ride in today. I got to do the last sort of 50 Ks swapping off with 3 other guys to get to the finish. So, you know, I'm all things considering, I'm pretty happy. And of course, we got to look at our, you know, the team effort and getting Martijn in the front there. Like, I think it was 15th in the end. That's his first ever Tour of Flanders. You know, that's awesome. And I think we got a lot to come from that guy in the future. So I think we're pretty happy with how the day went in the end.
I think that's the important thing, because the team is still developing in these big races, and they came together with a really good team performance and a team spirit.
The team spirit is always high here, and you know, we just wanted to go out there and try and see and learn a bit and get the younger guys to sort of get the experience of this race, and then possibly next year come back and have a proper go at it. And hopefully next year I can keep myself on the bike the whole year as well, and I know that I can, if I'm 100% fit and everything goes all right, then I can be up there as well. So you know, today the legs were definitely, there was more in there than what I showed, but you know, for some reason that Koppenberg climb, I never get into that one right. I always end up being a little bit too far back right there.
Pretty horrible. Don't worry, next week's the Forest of Arenberg.
Next week is the Forest of Arenberg. That'd be much better.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Well, you know, the commentary went so quick today because it was such a great race, but one man stood out, and Stein de Volder really deserved that victory, Paul.
That was a brave move. He did it exactly the right time, almost out of the handbook. Wait until the moment when the breakaway gets caught and go clear. He did that. I never really thought he was going to succeed, but what courage.
Well, there was no easy path to victory, was there? If you couldn't ride at the front and to the best of your ability, you were never going to win this race. There were a lot of good riders behind. Tom Bonen, though, I don't think he'd be very upset, because Stein de Volder was a great winner.
He played a real teammate. He did everything right to help his teammate get the chance of winning that race. He'll come up next week in the Paris-Roubaix and do his best.
After a great Milan-San Remo, don't forget you can get that on World Cycling Productions video as well. We've now had a great race here in Flanders, and there's plenty more to come. Until the next time, for Paul, for me, Phil Liggett, goodbye.